Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's Freeman Jack on TNS Radio and Scottish Sovereigns on the Land. As usual, we'll be discussing adult topics with adult language, so if you're easily offended, you may prefer to go and listen somewhere else, or just put your head in a bucket of water, perhaps, while I'm on here. They both work effectively well, I hear. We have Nik Gnomic on to Shoot the Breeze with us tonight. Good evening, Nick.
Good evening.
Were you feeling TNS withdrawals, seeing as we didn't do the welfare show this afternoon?
I was at a loose end.
Yeah.
I was all getting geared up and getting my routine together.
Yeah, no, it is an addiction.
Yeah, I think I think we both sort of stood around for a while when it came to, oh no, we're not on.
I must admit, it was quite alarming for me, sort of taking it from the sort of, I'm normally engineering the show, twiddling the knobs in the background. And obviously for me it's been priority for the last 6 months to make sure that on a Thursday afternoon that I'm up, available and conscious for 4 p.m. and kind of surfacing at about 3:45 and being told, oh, it's alright, you don't have to wake up. It still didn't feel right. It felt like having a quilt day from work or something, you know what I mean? Like, I really should be up and doing something.
I think a few people have had that sort of spirit going on.
Yeah, so if anybody wants to know why the welfare show wasn't on this afternoon, blame it on me, my rampant insomnia. Which has been absolutely ridiculous lately. I mean, we were discussing this, and neither of us are having a great easy time of sleeping at night, but I've got this, like, rolling insomnia where I literally can't predict from one day to the next when I'll be sleeping and how much I'll be sleeping for and how much rest I'll actually receive from the sleep that I bloody get. It's wearing me out.
It throws you. And I get to it, and you tend to be so active, you get later and later, and I get to a point of it's a case of I can't go to bed now, or you wake up and it's dark.
Yeah. I mean, part of this is the sort of curse of the active mind, isn't it? That we're both fairly can't even speak. Articulate, I was trying to say. Oh dear. I've got the words articulate and intelligent crossed in my head. It wouldn't come out right. Yeah, so we're both articulate and intelligent types and probably spend rather too much of our time considering our own navels. Philosophically speaking, I don't know about you, but I just can't turn my head off when it comes to laying on the pillow.
I think certain ways, I know sometimes you need half an hour. You've got to turn the computers off, turn all the electronics off, and sit down and think.
I mean, to be quite honest, I do that. I lay in bed for hours on end most days trying to sleep. You know what I mean? I will take myself away from everything about sort of 2 a.m. to 3 a.m. at the very latest. And we'll still be laying there, wide awake at 7:30, 8 o'clock, when everybody else is getting up. And today, you know what I mean, when did I get to sleep today? When did I bloody get to sleep today? It was like fucking 11:30, 12 o'clock, wasn't it?
I don't fucking know.
Yeah, no, it was, yeah. Well, no, I remember seeing the time ticking away at the morning and thinking, well, you know what I mean, if I'm going to engineer a show later, it's like now 6 hours from then, it's 5 hours from then, it's 4 hours from then. Even on my birthday the other day, I bloody was awake till, 12:30 in the afternoon, fell asleep for 2 hours and woke up feeling like crap for the rest of the day. It does get in the way.
In some senses, your body clock, if you were living close to the land, you would be very active during the day with your crops.
Well, this is one of the things that I found with living in a caravan by candlelight, was your body clock did tend to regulate much better than it does under electric light.
Yeah, because you're waking with the sunshine.
And the really peculiar thing was that the women's menstrual cycles all harmonised. So if you were living on a site with like 100 women, there were certain days of the month where it was not cool to be a man.
I can relate to that one. I think
yeah, but can you imagine 100 of them all at the same time? My God!
But in a way, if you look at how traditional communities worked, the women went off and got together.
Yeah. Well, they would certainly. The in tribal cultures, estrus is something that is hidden by the women of the tribe, and generally expressed through kind of fertility dance and things like this as a means of moderating the number of bloody children they have to bear. But apparently that's what lipstick's all about.
Oh, as in like the monkey, the red lips.
Yeah, as in representing the state of oestrus, and there's actually been various surveys done on the timing of women's oestrus and the colour that they choose to apply to the colour of lipstick they choose to apply, and it actually goes entirely with oestrus. That a woman who doesn't have a set lipstick colour, as some do, and has a range, that they will tend to put on brighter and brighter lipsticks as they reach the point of peak oestrus.
All right, you're losing me now, because in terms of that, I'm totally clueless.
Well, so basically it would simply mean that the more fertile they became, the more likely they were to conceive a child from mating, let's be frank, from mating. Then they would express that through increasingly darker shades of red in their lipstick. As an ultimate,
but
huh?
In terms of dealings with women, I'm pretty clueless, and I'm content with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. I had a great friend who used to insist that men and women should only come together for fertility rights. That as a species we weren't designed to live together. I tend to agree with him in some respects. I hope the missus ain't listening. We're going to be in so much trouble. You realise what we're committing suicide.
No, I think there's ways and means to balance.
Men talking about oestrus on the radio? Whatever next? What do they know about menstruating, for God's sakes? Sorry.
No,
just while I remember it, because I meant to say it as soon as I came on air, anybody that's been following my plastic reality, virtual reality stuff, and hearing me rave about Tom Campbell and Bruce Lipton, we have Tom Campbell lined up in the most incredible series of synchronicities since the universe began. Bitchin' Bob was listening to my pod the other week with Tom Campbell and Bruce Lipton, was so taken by it that he decided to get in touch with Tom that very night. Tom replied with a confirmation email within the hour, and is now coming on the 23rd. So my show this time on the 23rd, so that's 2 weeks tonight. We've got Tom Campbell, the American physicist, worked with NASA and all sorts of people, the originator of the My Big Toe, which is his big theory of everything, which is essentially the model that I'm using when I'm describing plastic reality to you, but essentially his description of it is actually one of it being a digital virtual reality model. A semantical difference, I would suggest. But yeah, we've got Tom Campbell on, and we may well go for an absolute marathon. He says he's more than happy to come on and do the 3 hours, and if we've still got fertile ground to cover, then obviously we'll roll over into me and Dubs' session and just go for broke, really. And hopefully we'll have him, hopefully, if it goes well, we'll have him on as a regular guest, so that will just be incredible. I'm just jumping from foot to foot. I'm so excited.
Well, I know what you've been saying before. I've been catching your shows, and you've been playing the stuff, and it's fantastic stuff. It's all worth taking on board.
And having, like I say, having lived this,
you should get Bob on. Bob's actually in the chat room now.
Oh yeah. Was it next week?
I do notice as well.
16th.
Kazza says you should be thanking him for non-attendance.
Hold on, 16 plus 7 is that 23?
Yeah, it's next week.
Oh, fucking hell, it's next week. Alright, okay.
There we go, yeah, it is next week. Kazza says we should be sanctioned for non-attendance, and I say, fine, guilty as charged. Diminish responsibility, at least.
Yeah. I never look at the bloody calendar. I mean, somebody else would have had to have told me.
It's a bunch of numbers.
Yeah. I must admit, I lived for about 6 years without calendars or clocks, and it was great. The time had a completely different texture during that period of my life than it ever had done at any other time, and I have tried my very best to review those 6 years in context of seasons and where I knew that I was and what the season was because of what fruit I was picking or what farm work that I was doing. And 6 years doesn't fit. It was much more. It works in the very best that I can reconstruct those 6 years comes down to a minimum of about 8. And I have no reasonable way of explaining the difference.
You're not measuring it.
Yeah, well, again, we're talking about Tom Campbell's strong and weak history, isn't it? Because I was making no record of the passing of time. The passing of time didn't keep to any normal record.
Well, if you don't keep time, it's not there with you. I had it with Wild Swan. It took me a while to get used to it because I didn't have clocks. But when I first got to meet her, I walked into a kitchen, there's a big clock on the wall, but no battery. And it never moved.
At least it's right once a day. Twice a day.
But it was strange not having been big kitchen clock. It's a case of you could feel yourself looking at it thinking, oh no, it's not the right time anyway.
Yeah, still keep glancing up at it. Who's that creeping in? Oh, hi, love. It's the well fairy with her beer.
Her beer?
Yes, her beer. I don't drink, do I?
Of course.
Tea and Spliffarian. Tea with milk and 2 sugars and Spliffarian, to be precise. But
sounds an excellent combination.
You've got to have a nutritionally complete and balanced diet, I find. Which was something
all the food groups. Yeah,
both main food groups, T and THC. No, we're sorted for vitamins, which is something that we're just about to get onto.
Oh, right.
I mean, like I say, the understanding of the kind of digital nature of reality doesn't, I think, necessarily detract from looking for sources of better health. So I would suggest that even though I was kind of like arguing the toss with you earlier about the applicability of any of these kind of health techniques with the knowledge of plastic reality and Bruce Lipton's biology of belief, that all of this is largely unnecessary. But saying that, it also would require a degree of practice and a degree of improvement, you know what I mean? You're not just going to be able to launch from believing one paradigm to living in a completely different paradigm and living only according to its rules. So I think that while people are in the paradigm of needing a pill to make them well, then finding appropriate pills that aren't going to kill them and are likely to make them well is an entirely valid focus for research. So what is it you've come across? It's a lot of stuff about vitamin D for a start, wasn't it?
Well, it was something I'd done for a while. And I'd learnt about this. I mean, it was, strangely enough, it was like a tech podcast. I think PC Dave mentioned him. It's a guy's been in computers forever called Steve Gibson. And he stopped his tech show and just said he's doing a one-off, and he said, check this out, and ran through some basic facts of how it can boost your immune system and actually help with so many things. I think of one thing of all, it's a case of do not get colds. And I think for that alone, because of the back problem, and I've had it, I've had a disc move just from sneezing.
Yeah. Most of my bad backs were caused by my persistent bloody cough.
And if I'm next to someone with a cough, I'm twitching. It sets me off. I think I don't want to catch anything off you. So solely for that alone, I thought give that a go. And for 3 years now. And this is not meant to be any sort of rocket science. It's just a case of I took vitamin D, I monitored it, kept it regular, and it was fine. Never had colds until I mucked up this year, expecting there was going to be a summer that didn't happen. Got stinking cold because I downed the dose. But I'm reading another book, and it's basically saying part of the programming, because I'm taking 5,000 units, which, if you talk to medical professionals, they would suck their air through the teeth, shake their heads and say that's way over the limit, because the limit is 1,000, which I think is effectively the bare minimum you need not to get rickets. If you're seriously deficient, that will stop you getting very badly ill. But then I think I just came across, this was a book online of a guy who seems to have a medical background and family with a medical background who's taking vast amounts. Now, he's talking about very huge amounts, I'm presuming short term, as a boost to the system, but then dropping down to about 20,000.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking about quite extreme things of like joint and knee and bone injuries starting to sort themselves out.
Okay.
But I think in terms of, as I say, this is new research to me. But I think also he teams this with vitamin K, which is something I've not done my research on. I don't want to go there, but he's saying if you take too much, it can deplete that, which is what I think the doctors have got scared of, because when people have taken huge, vast amounts, they've said there's toxic effects. So the mainstream medical people, I think helped by the pharmaceuticals probably as well, are saying, no, you can get serious toxic effects. But I think if you supplement with the K, which I think is also needed in the process to deal with moving calcium around the body, keeping your immune system boosted. And as I say, I've just looked at this case of one simple solution. If you have to take one thing, one tablet, if you were going to stockpile something, it's a case of it can keep you healthy. And I think for a survivalist, they would think like multivitamins as covering everything. But in terms of getting your general health going, take them now and keep a supply.
Mm. See, I have issue with the whole concept of vitamin deficiency. Anyway, I have largely lived my life in complete ignorance of any dietary requirements other than to eat well. And certainly as a result, I've never taken any kind of vitamin supplements. But I should imagine that if most dietitians were to examine my diet, they would be expecting me to be breaking out with scurvy at any moment, because I take on almost no vitamin C from any part of my diet. So quite how that works, I don't know. But again, this kind of dials into what I was saying about the implication, the inference of Bruce Lipton's biology of belief work would be that the actual health-giving benefits of taking that vitamin supplement would be entirely a placebo-like effect, where in meeting some perceived lack in oneself would be the intention and the belief and then the action to confirm and to create all three. And this is what I was saying to you on privately earlier about the issue with MMS. It may well be that MMS does work for certain things and is excellent for certain things, but I would suggest that some of the claims are exaggerated, and certainly I've had my pet scientist contacting me with some fairly grave concerns about some of the suggested uses of MMS, causing me to look more closely into it, and I found that he was probably quite right to have those concerns. But essentially what I think that we're seeing here is the effect of the medicine man. You know what I mean? We look at the kind of African witch doctor with, you know, I mean, incredulous disbelief, and yet when you actually look at their results, they're very similar to a modern Western doctor, and yet they have applied no known medicine, they've done no medical procedure, they have effected nothing other than instigating the placebo effect. And in fact, many of the pharmaceutical companies at the moment are so stuck. I don't know if you know, but the placebo effect has increased 400% in magnitude in its effect in the last decade. Drug companies are now struggling to get new drugs onto the market because they have to prove that they're better than placebo, and placebo is now 400 times better than it used to be.
Oh yeah, I mean the placebo's going crazy, and they have to. I mean
that in itself raises.
Can they keep to exploit?
Well, that in itself raises some very big questions about the nature of placebo as well. The nature of the placebo effect. That if it's possible for you to have a 4 times more effective treatment from a sugar pill than from the very latest medicine, over how that would have happened sort of 10 years ago, then. Sorry, love. Okay, love, you've got to pop out again. then what we're looking at is surely a change in the underlying nature of the inference of belief over pharmacology. If the placebo effect has magnified, multiplied by four times, 400% in 10 years, what is that telling us about the nature of placebo?
I think the placebo is very strong, but it's how people actually access that.
Well, this is what I'm saying. The drug companies are now trying their very best to exploit the placebo effect and find out how to exploit the placebo effect.
How can we sell them sugar pills?
More or less.
Sugar pills make you better for everything.
Well, I would suggest that actually Prozac was their first attempt at that.
I had great fun with that.
Yeah, but it's largely a sugar pill. It's, you know what I mean, there's nothing really in there of any particular neurological significance other than the slightly dulling effect of the fluoride, which really isn't, as far as a you know what I mean, for anybody that's been on real psychiatric medication, Prozac is just like something you buy over the counter at the sweet shop, you know what I mean? There's certainly no... it's just completely unlike anything that you would be given as a psychiatric drug.
Well, I've heard of some of the other things and how like.
And it's a bit like giving somebody a joint and 4 weeks, you know, and giving somebody a joint and 4 weeks later, you know, what I mean, a joint with nothing in it, and 4 weeks later going, well, are you getting anything off it yet? Oh, you need to keep trying. Maybe we should up the dose a bit. Yeah, have a bit more tobacco.
It takes a month to start the work.
Bollocks.
I mean, I don't know. I only know personal experience-wise. I took it, and it was horrible.
Yeah.
And I got in trouble, so I stopped taking it.
Like I say, I have one friend who had a very serious brain injury, who is the only person that I know who, although she doesn't like having to take it, she needs to take it personally.
If it works, Jack, it works.
Yeah, and she hasn't yet found a way around the issue of the return of all of her neuro rehab issues on the withdrawal of it. So, yeah,
if you need it, keep on it. You know, if you do
well, as you know, I'm working with some.
I'm
working with some really seriously mentally ill people through my kind of off-air work, and I never ever advocate that people stop taking their medication. I will encourage them to improve other elements of their life that may enable them to forgo the medication or reduce the medication, but I never ever tell people to come off their medication. It's such a dangerous thing to do.
You shouldn't tell them anything like that at all. If they want to make that choice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well,
I would say...
to be quite honest, even then, even if they were to make the choice that they wanted to come off the medication, I would still urge grave caution.
Try and talk them out of it as well.
Well, not necessarily try and talk them out of it, but I would urge grave caution, because there's that whole... the whole thing about coming off the medication becomes the focus of their intention, and they take their eye off the ball of the kind of psychological rebound that tends to happen about 4 or 5 months after the medication is withdrawn, and as the last bit of the medication kind of leaves the bone marrow and the fatty deposits, that's when you get like suicidalisation kicks in and people start kind of topping themselves or going on random murdering sprees, as is often the case. I saw a Jim Mars video the other day where he basically listed all of the American kind of school shooters, like school massacres, and every single one of them, bar none, was either directly on psychiatric medication when they did it, or had withdrawn from psychiatric medication within the 3 months before the shooting.
And I think in certain respects, I think because of what I hear of how widespread it is, they're bound to have that, even if it's just tiny percentages. Even if you're looking at less than 1 in 100, with the number, you know, the size of America, you're going to have a couple of those every year, so.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. I'm not entirely sure about all of that. I see those really as being a consequence of the kind of not the gun culture, but the militaristic culture that is endemic with Americans. And if you add to that the modern gaming culture of, PC shoot 'em ups and stuff, where you can essentially practice going around and killing lots of people. That dialed into post-pubescent sort of confusion and a gun culture where guns are readily available, I would suggest are much more likely to be responsible for the sort of actions that we see of kind of school shoot-em-ups. And especially with the kind of performance focused education that we see forced down our necks now as well. You know what I mean? We all know that, I don't know about you, but I didn't fit very well into the academic mould, and so being forced into a very linear academic structure never fit well on my shoulders, and I was fairly well supported at home. I should imagine that somebody, in my situation, who had an appalling home life, or was abused perhaps at home, would find that conformity an overbearing pressure, and whenever you place an overbearing pressure on somebody, it leaks out at the seams, doesn't it?
Well, I had different experiences. In a way, I was good at taking exams, so I did all right at school. But when I went beyond that, got into university, I think with 1 year of that, I thought, what the hell is this about?
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't really stretched myself enough. I wondered where I was going. I thought, I can sort of have an idea of a general job, and I don't really want it. And then I went to Stonehenge Festival. And you start to look at things a little bit differently after that. Certainly, I spent a lot of the time looking at things very differently and very colourfully.
Mm. Yeah. Yes, again, like I say, these remedies, these alternative remedies are something to be sought out if you're confronted with a health problem that you're faced with. But we were talking then about taking vitamin D to prevent getting colds. Well, as you well know, I haven't suffered from cough, cold or infirmity other than physical infirmity for nearly 4 years now. And that's been largely borne out by just a simple understanding of this biology of belief, this nature of the primacy of consciousness over the primacy of matter, where the understanding that everything that you experience is ill health you called upon yourself, and then you have to question yourself as to why you would call that upon yourself. It's a degree of self-examination that you have to allow yourself to consider the possibility that you're a complete fucking masochist.
Well, I've been confronted with some of that, because in a way, I grew up as a kid, and we ate McDonald's and drank Coke, and everyone did it. And I think, I've talked to Wild Swan about this in terms of, if you're a kid in the 70s and crispy pancakes were spaceman food, and some of it was quite new and novel.
Mm.
Most of it was rank.
Mm.
Most of it, there is no way I'd want to go near it today.
Oh, golden nuggets. They started remarketing golden nuggets.
Right.
They were vile in the first place, and they're equally vile now. All they've got is that stupid bloody cowboy character, selling the product.
I think, potato waffles. Even, I think pot noodles. How exotic were pot noodles when they started?
Oh, blimey, yeah, no, there's nothing more exotic than a curry pot noodle, was there?
Yeah.
I actually remember the first supermarket opening in my hometown of Hornchurch. I think it would have been a Wavy Line or one of those kind of fairly small franchise places, and it was the first time we had ever seen a shop with more than one product in it. Other than a greengrocers, a butchers, a bakers. So that's that's in my lifetime. So I ain't that bloody old. I am. But.
Well, I think in terms of, there was still some of it about. There were. I think everywhere I go now, certainly if you see a small town, you don't see those. Don't always see butchers for definite. Butchers are very rare, even when we're out and about, and we're in a very rural part of the world. They don't always have lots of village shops. A lot of them.
That's exactly what I was going to say. If you live out in that part of the country and you're part of a farming community, you normally know a farmer that butchers his own whatever, or a potato grower that's got a farm shop.
They'll work it out.
Yeah.
And I think in some terms on that, where the local communities can work it out themselves.
Mm.
And if you know where the farmers are, you can sort that out. But people in town don't.
I must admit, it was quite interesting watching a BBC programme on the history of the tractor the other day. Again, I love watching these kind of random BBC productions where the subject material is so safe that things leak through. I would suggest that what happens is that with some of these subjects, they are just so abjectly safe that there's no conceivable way that any national security risk can be placed on anything that is said on the subject, that they don't have to go through MI5 for the script proofing, and they don't have to, you know what I mean, get issued with a rubber stamp of authority from the Ministry of Defence. And as a result, the most telling facts are illustrated on these programmes. And one of the things that this particular one went on about was that up until the advent of the mechanical tractor, that wheat had largely been an animal feed.
Yep, there you go.
And then as soon as we invented the tractor and began monoculture, we exported it to America, and suddenly we are inundated with cheap American wheat, which drives all of our farmers out of business.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone smell anything hinky going on here?
Oh, yes.
But again, you see, this is... I don't see any fucking monsters anymore. I don't see any Bond villain stroking a white cat and plotting the downfall of mankind. I see natural systems evolving from the fractal matrix and expressing themselves through the very same rule set that we are obliged to abide by, and it's simply the misinterpretation of the actions and the resultant reactions due to a less than complete model on which to base those actions on. And I kind of do little mind games where I try and kind of validate the actions of Pol Pot or Vlad the Impaler or something. Just really try and examine it from the other side and to see how they might think, you know what I mean? And I really do see no villains. I've looked into a lot of these kind of characters and looked into their kind of life histories, and well, I was saying to you, wasn't it, about Hitler having to be in the same room as Goering, because Goering was a fat aristocrat who lived almost entirely on sausage and smelt of pig, and Hitler, being a vegetarian animal lover, absolutely detested the man for it.
Yeah. There was another thing, I don't know the truth of this, but apparently I think when he came into office early, he had almost every road in Germany planted with apples. And as far as I know, if you walk in Germany today, there are still apple trees. And it was effectively, he said, even a poor person can go out down the road, collect apples, there will be food.
Yeah. Well, this kind of dives into this whole concept that, this... and is something that I really need to take issue with Tom Campbell, with his use of this kind of the universe is love and everything is moving towards love, and I actually find very little evidence of that. What I actually see evidence of is this kind of overarching preference for beneficence. So if it benefits enough people, or enough, if there is enough benefit from it, then, then it will be prospered by the universe. And sometimes it's very difficult to see how some cruel, evil act could possibly be a beneficent act. But when you actually look into it, things like the Afghani war, or, the fact that we've bombed bloody... bombed Iraq back to the Stone Age. We've bombed Iraq back to the Stone Age, and that million people are now, or a couple of million people are now, struggling and under awful conditions. And I have no sympathies for the people that have done that to them. But when you actually look at it on the grander scale, the liberation of that oil for the larger number of people, for the sort of global oil consumption market, you could conceivably see that there's a degree of beneficence in that. It might not be nice, and this is essentially what we're coming up against. This is why I find the whole problem with the concept of it all being down to love. And that to me is a slight misunderstanding. And to a degree, leaves people open to being very disappointed when they find that the universe doesn't reflect that love. Because I did it for years. I spent years walking around as a complete fucking hippie, just going, oh, love, you know what I mean? Love's everything, you know what I mean? Just keep loving. And the world stamped on me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the understanding of beneficence, the understanding of, well, if you can, like, shift product, then you get the goods to shift. And that's the real nature of the universe, is that if you can do the deal, if you can get it out there, if you can make it available for people, then it will come to you.
Well, I think but that's part of the process. You know, you have to engage with the world in some way.
I mean, look. Let's take the kind of Hitler's Germany, the kind of Weimar Germany, and we can see that, you know, I mean, they were incredibly prosperous. But what they were doing was they were entering into vast social schemes, vast social employment schemes, and that those social employment schemes, although very handy for moving military about the country largely, were also very bloody useful to the population. All through that period, before they engage in any grand warfare, they're incredibly prosperous. As soon as they begin to impinge upon other states and other nations, and begin to threaten their prosperity, their beneficence, then the universe suddenly starts to twist, and the more they push to take, the more the universe kicks back and goes, no, you're not having it.
Well, absolutely. If you look at the truth of history, you know, what if Hitler had thought, oh, I don't want to get into a fight with England, I won't invade Poland, I'll stop where I am. I've got plenty of room already, I'll just wait a bit.
Well, we would have probably seen the establishment. We would have probably seen the establishment of the EU bloody 40 years before it actually happened.
Yeah,
And the EU is basically Hitler's plan for Europe anyway. Word for word, the Lisbon Treaty. I think it's the first 5 lines of the Lisbon Treaty is exactly word for word translated the bloody Hitler's plan for post-war Europe. Literally word for word. There's not even a comma difference. So who won the war again? Were we the good guys? Oh, I don't know. It's all very confusing. Boo,
I was
another
supposed to in the
tea.
chat room, whilst one wants me to flag it up, Hitler made it illegal, animal cruelty illegal. You know, it's no matter, you know, no one's 100%.
Well, I mean,
well,
Hugh's take on Hitler, the one that I've done on air, my kind of alternative history of World War II, places Hitler as being this kind of anti-Freemasonic, anti-fiat currency, you know what I mean? Transformational leader who basically came up against the banking elites. That they put him into power, and then he didn't do what they expected him to do, and suddenly he took all the money and the support that they've given him and turned it towards social ends, and they weren't happy. And so that's why he ended up in the Second World War, was because the bankers wanted it.
I think it's a repeat of so many similar stories from different angles.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the parts of that theory as well was that the whole of the larger part of the actions of the Second World War were nothing at all to do with militaristic gains. They were simply aerial bulldozing campaigns to clear the way for the post-Second World War European road system.
And I think it creates industry. You know, you gear up all sorts of machinery.
Well, if you actually look at the pre-Second World War map of the European road network, and you'll find that virtually every major road made its way directly into the centre of every city on its path. And every single one of those kind of like medieval European cities was essentially designed for horse and cart traffic. And you put 2 lorries down them and they couldn't pass. Now, you try and tell me that you would have got through a campaign of promoting the bulldozing flat of virtually every single surviving medieval town and village in Europe as a political campaign. Not going to happen, is it?
That would tie in terms of where they say, you know, certain cities were bombed that weren't industrial.
Well, look at the bombing pattern for London. The whole of Chelsea survived. The whole of Westminster survived. I mean, everywhere that the rich and famous lived were largely untouched, apart from by the accidental casualty of German pilots that dropped their bombs in the wrong fucking place. Who got bombed out during the war? Oh yeah, it was the East End ghettos, wasn't it? All those unfortunate places that people owned that the government couldn't just go in and compulsory purchase and bulldoze because there would have been too much of a riot. Oh, funny that none of those existed after the Second World War, was it? Who were the good guys again?
I don't know. I read Catch 22
Again there, speak to our parents' generation of Germans about their feelings about Bomber Harris.
Yeah, I know there's been strong feeling about that.
Oh, and, Jesus, yeah, especially after Dresden, because Dresden was one of those wooden medieval cities, and the reason why Dresden went up as such a bloody firestorm was because Bomber Harris covered it with bloody white phosphorus.
Yeah, and Dresden, don't think Dresden should have been a target.
Oh, Dresden wasn't a militaristic or industrial target at all. It was purely. What was it? Fucking. They've sown the wind, let them reap the whirlwind. Was Churchill's phrase about Bomber Harris's campaign. They said, well, they've bombed us. We're going to do whatever we want to them. Well, they bombed us with medium and light bombers. You know what I mean? We went over there not only with our own heavy bombers, but went over there with all the Yank heavy bombers as well. And the tonnage of TNT that was dropped on Germany and the German-occupied parts of Europe during the war was just unbelievable. And again, this aerial bombing campaign would have had the lovely little side effect of largely traumatising the entire civilian population of Europe for an entire generation. And what's easier to manipulate than a traumatised population? We'll do it, just please don't beat us again, Massa.
Well, exactly. It's a case of, now we've done it, get on and sort it out and rebuild everything, get back to work.
Yeah.
They've already got people skilled up. In a way, World War II brought in equality in the workplace more, but not because it was the right thing to do, because it was the profitable thing to do. Initially they needed them for the war, but afterwards it's a case of, well, now we have all this workforce. Yeah,
well, certainly even then the demographic of the effects of the Second World War, again, you have to look at in the context of virtually every of age man in Europe was sent to war, and if they weren't killed, they were maimed, and if they weren't maimed, they were psychologically traumatised beyond repair. So you take the entire flower of a nation's fruit and ruin it for a generation. And to be quite honest, this is another argument why we've been inundated with what appears to be social engineering on a kind of immigration front, where migrant communities appear to have been selectively introduced into areas. It's entirely possible that without the migrant communities and the genetic influx that accompanies them, we'd all be, half-wit, half-wit retards from the poor gene pool that would have been left over after the war.
I mean, I don't know, not having looked at the numbers.
Well, if you just think about it on an evolutionary scale, if you take every single fit young man and go and put them into battle, where they've got very low chance of survival unharmed, then who are you left with as the undamaged breeding stock? All of the people that had flat feet, were half blind, had mental deficiencies. That's your breeding stock. And like we were talking about with the aristocracy, the reason why we've got a German and a Greek bloody queen and consort is simply because the British royal family had become so bloody inbred by Victoria's day that they all had fingers and toes dropping off and couldn't sire bloody heirs. So,
but that was early enough for them to start doing something about it back then.
Well, it was certainly early enough for them to realise that something was going amiss and bring in some fresh stock from the continent, some fresh breeding stock.
I don't even want to begin to equate to that world, because I imagine Must be quite restrictive being in there.
Yeah, I wouldn't swap.
You only have a choice of so many people that you can be with.
Yeah, I wouldn't swap for all the tea in China. I've been around enough rich and famous people to know that I wouldn't swap my life for theirs, not for one bloody minute.
I don't think it makes it any better. It just makes the scale of it bigger.
Oh, boo, Tiggies. So, busy Facebooking in the background, or whatever you're doing, Tumblring, commenting on other people's pictures. What an encouraging pastime. Sorry.
No, it's becoming that now. Even Facebook does it. People are putting text in as a JPEG, so it's a picture, so it actually works in Facebook.
I did it today.
Because people won't read just plain text now. And it seems to percolate up as well. They seem to encourage it.
Well, it's easy to click share, isn't it?
I mean, I watched Idiocracy again after what Vin recommended, and I think it's a crap American film, but the plot line is scary. I tend to see more of it happening every day.
Yeah, I'll just to go back to the chat room here, just noticed that Sven's posted a really poignant comment about Dresden, and yes, obviously I know about Bomber Harris's campaign on the rest of the... Again, we're talking about largely wooden timber frame buildings, medieval town centres in Germany, and his carpet bombing campaign of the civilian population of Germany was just unconscionable and was a complete war crime, prosecuted war crime of a magnitude that no other country has ever achieved. Even Hiroshima and Nagasaki have nothing like the kind of huge effects that the carpet bombing campaign of civilian Europe and Bomber Harris. I just got to go here. One up in the chat. Churchill was a bipolar, bisexual, Kurd murdering racist, and those are his best features.
Both valid. What more do I say? No,
Yeah.
I mean, Dresden is shockingly bad.
Yeah.
I think I read Kurt Vonnegut and I thought I was prepared for it, and I think he was quite mild with it. But even that was quite... Yeah, it doesn't bear thinking about.
Yeah, and any cursory glance at the rules of engagement under any laws of war would show that to be a war crime of unbelievable magnitude. I mean, certainly one of the primary things in the Geneva Convention, which we were supposed to be a signatory to at the time, was, what's the bloody term? Retaliation can only be brain blank, equivalent. So even if you're attacked and war is declared upon you, your retaliation to that act of war has to be equivalent. And the very declaration of an inequivalent bombing campaign to be carried out on the now retreating German forces and the German civilization population as a whole was just a war crime. And I mean, this is the other thing that a lot of people have no knowledge of, that in fact the most parts of the treaties of the Geneva Convention were actually created and put into place to curtail the actions of the British Army and the British Navy. They were due to our actions during the Boer War and various other militaristic empirical campaigns around the planet, and because we invented concentration camps and genocide and chemical weaponry and all of these other lovely things that we are so busy blaming everybody else for threatening to use. Well, just remember this, people. We invented them. We used them first. That's the reason why there are war crimes in the first place, is because we committed most of them and the rest of the world were pissed off about them. So.
And the reality still is, certainly down here on the south coast, we've got a lot of bases and there's a lot of factories, and they still rely on that because we ship that to the world.
Yeah, this is the thing. This is one of the reasons why we're likely to come under the closest scrutiny from our government, is because if we manage to set precedent with case law in this country, it's directly exported to the 120 countries of the colonies, because they all essentially adopt British case law. as the foundation for their legal systems.
Yeah.
And that's without all of the other countries that all rely on the British judicial and political system. My God, that dog's tail. I don't know how it's still attached. Yeah, and we're back on there. This is Freeman Jack and Nik Gnomic from the Welfare All-Stars. Just Shootin the Breeze. We're on TNS Radio and ScottishSovereignSontheland.ning.com. You can always chuck us a question in the chat box if you've got something pressing that you want to ask. Just a quick word of support there to... let me just scroll back up the chat there so I'll get his name right. Welsh Warrior. Sorry to hear that you've lost your gaff, mate. I know that it must seem pretty bloody bad at the minute. I'm sure that we've all got stories like this, but the last time I lost a home forcibly or was forcibly removed from my home was when I moved back from being a traveller back to Brick, and I lost a beautiful lifestyle and a beautiful home and a beautiful place to live, and gained a missus and twins. So, you know what I mean? We resist change. We tend to resist change as an organism, and sometimes it's better to embrace change that you can't prevent. You there, Nick?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. Actually, just on our way out.
Oh, okay. Bye, Judy. Good night.
She just stepped on a snail in there. Only
oh, no. I hate stepping on snails. I always have to apologise. I don't know about you.
I'm sorry.
There you go. Are we soft bastards? Yes, we are. Nobody else apologises to snails for treading on them, Julie.
No, I'm saying sorry for going, oh, you're saying, yeah, okay, good night.
No one's held up with me. None of them want to leave. All hell could break loose if anything happens. Now, where were we?
I even usher flies out of the house if possible. If they're annoying me.
I will do. Yeah, no, I don't want to kill stuff.
No,
I don't want to kill stuff. Spiders, definitely.
No, I've not got a problem with spiders. I must admit that was one of the kind of lessons that I got from the road was how belief affected the behaviour of insects, which was one of the things that kind of pushed me. Again, this is the thing. The beauty of this MBT of Tom Campbell's is that it describes how what previously I would have had to have relied on the descriptions of mysticism to explain, and puts it into the realms of hard science, repeatable, doable, rational, logical science.
Yeah, I'd agree with that in terms of, the only thing I would say just in terms of what experience is, I've never had problems with mosquitoes. Never any summer, not in this country. Somewhere in a hot climate, maybe, but very rarely. And I don't know, I've just accepted, I think only just accepting it, goes, no, I don't have a problem with it, don't think about it.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling back through the...
I think there was one on there, I think Kaz put reciprocity agreements.
Oh, yeah.
See, I was going to say, do you want to try and say that, or shall I have a go?
I'm glad you tried it.
Oh. It took a bit of effort. Should have had a run up.
Yeah. Just taking a run up, yeah. Step back 2 words. Take a run up. Alright, where the hell was I going with this? Just the when I first moved on the road, my eldest boy's mother that I was living with at the time was one of these types that insisted on murdering anything that flew, buzzed. You know what I mean? Anything that moved within her space was considered subject for removal by whatever means. And before long, we were living in this kind of caravan full of the corpses of all of these poor dumb creatures, which kind of offended me, and I wasn't happy with it. And she wouldn't kind of change her behaviour simply because I didn't like it. But it became such a problem, and we were literally having no impact. You know what I mean? Fly spray, whatever. You know what I mean? When you're living out in the woods, there'll always be another fly. You know, and if they want to come in, there will always be another fly. And partly kind of learning what sort of things attracted flies, you know what I mean? It wasn't always the obvious, you know what I mean? Rubbish that you hadn't thrown away. It might be, I mean, plates that hadn't been washed up or an open something of something. And apart from just minor modifications in how we lived our lives that reduced the kind of desire of critters to come into our living space, it was very much when we stopped killing them. And as soon as we stopped killing them and I started to acknowledge them, accept them, and generally speaking kind of, I don't know, psychically encourage them that there wasn't a great deal of pickings in my caravan and that they'd be very much better off out in the woods where they had plenty to eat and what have you. And before very long, the very last place that I lived, the woodlands was an ancient woodlands. It was probably in excess of 1,000 years old. And I've rarely ever been to anywhere quite like it. On a warm spring day, you couldn't see a single square inch of air, a single cubic inch of air anywhere that wasn't full of stuff that was flying and buzzing and darting, and it was like there was a fog of insects. And yet, even with all the doors and windows open on my caravan, the only insects that would ever come into my place was the occasional earwig that I would find in my sugar bowl. And that was it.
But so what you're saying, basically, if you're not eating meat...
No, I was a meat eater. No, I was a meat eater at the time. No, the only change that I can put it down to was the stopping the massacre. Yeah, so no longer becoming, I mean, this kind of like carnage creator, and acknowledging the right of these things to exist, to coexist, and then simply to encourage them to coexist somewhere where they don't piss me off. And I actually found that one of the few exceptions to this is what I now refer to as shoe flies. You know those little flies that you get that love to do the little square dance around your lampshade?
Yes.
The really small ones, they're like sort of a third of the size of a blue bottle or whatever. Well, shoe flies have a mischievous intent. And shoe flies would often fly in a clutch of 3 or 4 and simply fly around and have fun. And they would have great fun with humans. Taunting them, they'd do anything to get them to engage in the game of shoe fly.
I would go further and say I think I've seen them engage the dogs.
Yeah. And they would always be able to outfly anything that you would try and do. You'd go to swat them in mid-air, they'd stop flying, fly backwards, fly around your hand and carry on, sort of as if nothing had happened.
Have they sort of learned behaviour? Hang on, these humans are really slow.
Well, to them, we must move like bloody JCBs or something, you know what I mean? Hardly rapid. And anything that lives its life that quick must have a perception of time that's completely different to our own.
Yeah, I think, unless you want to do something, like, say, Karate Kid thing or something, what you're going to do, you're very rarely going to catch them. Yeah.
So again, I learnt that if you simply kind of mentally embraced the shoe fly's fun and accepted it as equivalent behaviour, then they would more often than not go away and start troubling someone or something else. That they literally seem to seek out fun, and that if you didn't, they're a bit like internet trolls. If you didn't bait them, then they'd go away and trouble somebody else. Oh, you're boring, I'm going to go do something else.
Okay, I would say, but put that on another level as well. If you're actually out in woodland where I've been camping, would you say that same principle can also work with the smoke from the fire?
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying. I think that you're looking at a very much more chaotic. The smoke from the fire is, or if it does have any sort of sentience, then it would be unimaginable for us to try and imagine what that experience of existence must be like. So from that perspective, one would have to assume that sort of insect life would have very much more of an intentional interaction with the reality that it interacts with, whereas the smoke from a fire would be very much more of a mechanical interaction. So yes, I know exactly what you mean, that the people that seem to be the most troubled by the smoke from campfires seems to be the ones that are the most troubled by the smoke from campfires. Don't you find?
I mean, again, but even posing the question, I say, can I specifically say that's true from observation? And, how do you rule out other factors? A case of, if you are used to how a fire's dealing with, you can actually change positions.
Yeah, choose your spot better. Yes.
Deal with it. If you are aware of how the wind's turning.
Yeah, well, in that you do obviously have to bear in mind the familiarity with which you have with campfires, because as you say, you would know not to sit bloody downwind on a persistently kind of windy day. But yeah, I mean, certainly this is one of the things that, like I say, prior to Tom Campbell, I had to rely and refer to the mystics, the ancients, the various kind of mystical and esoteric texts in order to explain the subjective experience of reality that I have personally lived. And with this kind of MBT, this my big toe theory. Sorry, I shouldn't really put theory after it because it contains the word theory. That would be theory of theory. The my big toe theory essentially describes all elements that would previously have to rely on mysticism or belief in forces beyond that which are currently understood by science in order to explain them.
Well, absolutely. But in terms of where we've gone, the things we do today are effectively magic. If you take it from the perspective, if you took a medieval person and put them here, and I'm sitting in a shed talking to another disembodied voice, and there's a load of people typing conversations, which still they may not read, but they'd have to wonder what the hell's going on. And in a sense, we have to be prepared that, certain things of wonder, that you can have a mobile phone now, that the thing I remember seeing as a kid, the first idea of that would have been Star Trek. Yeah,
the transponder, of course.
And, when you see certain iconic things that sort of work.
To be quite honest, the flip phone I always thought was essentially the mobile phone company's sort of tip of a nod of acknowledgement to the old Star Trek transponder with its flip-up lid. Why you would need to flip open a walkie-talkie before speaking into it was kind of one of those little unnecessary prop tricks, wasn't it? The flick of the wrist to open the transponder.
I still have one.
What, a flip phone?
I have a very basic phone. I think it's actually got a camera in it. It's the first one I've had with camera in. I don't want to, I only think, one of my theories, I keep saying it, is smartphones are only so named because they make you look less intelligent. So most people are tuned out on smartphones.
I think if you're going to pursue any sort of conspiracy theorising, I would suggest that every single new feature that your smartphone acquires, if you actually look at the cost of putting in the infrastructure to support that feature, you would not see enough profit margin in the inclusion of that feature in order to be able to accommodate it within any sort of a commercial model. So in which case, why the hell have we all got GPS on our phones? Because think about the satellite.
GPS is obvious.
Well, think about the satellites and the cost of putting them up into space, the software, the distribution, the updating of all the maps. I mean, on my Nokia, it's now free for life. Free GPS maps. So, you know what I mean? They can track me for the rest of the life of the phone, if they wish.
Well, they can track the phone.
Oh, of course, and this is one thing that I often do, you know what I mean, if I've got things to do, is I make sure that the phone stays at home, and if I've got to take a phone with me, it'll be a phone without the GPS tracking in it.
Or, if you're stuck, a bit of foil. A bit of foil's not good, actually, because it'll kill the battery trying to signal. Take the battery out. You know, if you really want to do that, but I don't think it makes much difference.
No, I have a good friend who's insane about things like that. That he doesn't like you walking into the house with a mobile phone with a battery in it. That he only ever puts the battery into his mobile phone as and when he actually wants to make a call, and then immediately takes it out. So don't try and return a call because you'll always get his phone is no longer connected.
Okay, well that's fine then.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I'd say, you know, if that's what they want. I mean, I know generally, I wonder how sensitive I am to Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
I think ultimately we've seen it explode, and I don't think we're going to see the consequences for a few years on that. But I think it's starting to come through, and I know certain people are more sensitive than others anyway, and it's spreading out.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would have to say on that score is, having worked as an audio and visual technician. One of the things that I've had to be very conversant in is the inverse square law. When you're working with any kind of projection or any kind of sound work, then you have to consider the inverse square law in working out the performance requirements of the projector that you're using and how to place it and where to place it and etc, etc. And the one thing with the inverse square law is that wattage is the key, that the distance and wattage magnify exponentially the further you get from a device. So essentially, in order to impart the same wattage onto somebody that's twice the distance from a device, you'd have to impart 4 times the wattage from the original device. And most of these devices are running on such low wattage, even the mobile phone masts are essentially running on such very low wattages that you would have very grave difficulty in actually spotting a physiological result from such a minor. You'd have very much greater impacts from things like solar activity and planetary activity than you would from your average kind of Wi-Fi transmitter. But obviously I can't be absolutely certain that Wi-Fi and mobile phones don't have health implications, but I think that most of the health implications are largely understood now, and it's really people who work in extraordinary situations, people who work down tunnels and in the underground, really need to be turning their phones off when they're out of signal range, because that's the one thing that your mobile phone in your pocket will do, is, like you say, if you wrap it in tin foil, it will simply turn up the signal strength in an effort to try and find a beacon. And I've experienced this with my smartphone, that the Wi-Fi on it, if you go down into a tunnel with the phone and the Wi-Fi active, that you can actually feel it tingling in your hand, because it's turned up all of its various wattage outputs, and you can literally feel the thing kind of starting to cook in your hand.
I have actually had that. I had a phone that was in one of my trouser pockets, and I got a little rash on my leg. I think that was running out of signal. I mean, I don't know, I have to say, the one thing, and it may well be back to placebo effect again. If I have a nice campsite and I'm pitching up, and my phone says no bars, I'm a very happy bunny. But even if there is a small signal, it's still turned off and thrown away. And I don't know if that's placebo, but getting away from that feels quite nice, switching off from it. I don't know if that's more a psychological thing than anything else.
The Prisoners just put in the chat, who'd want to track me? Quite right. It's not exactly like I'm some dangerous revolutionary, you know what I mean? And that is something as well, that in this movement there's such a high level of paranoia, which largely isn't supported by any grave interest by the security services. I know that occasionally we rub MI5 up the wrong way, and they have to poke their nose in and throw a few warning shots across the bows, but largely speaking I think they ignore us because we talk a load of nonsense.
Oh, well, I could well imagine. I mean, yeah, maybe we're keeping someone in.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, maybe there is someone in. I would imagine Cheltenham.
Yeah, well, certainly.
A little room in Cheltenham.
Well, certainly when we were doing a lot of when I was covering a lot of the court cases that were going on, the Roger Hayes, the Rusty court cases, the Norman Scarf stuff, there was a way of watching the hits coming into TNS on the globe that used to be up, that used to show the hits, and you couldn't see the actual IP of who was coming in, but you saw a location for the IP that was coming in, and by watching that during the shows, it was great. There would be like a little clutch from Cheltenham, then there'd be a wait of 15 minutes, then there'd be a little clutch from the City of London on a Sunday or a Saturday or whatever, when of course there's nobody working in the City of London. You know, in the City of London's like 9 to 5 Monday to Friday and is completely empty with no residents at any other time of the day. So the fact that there were and it wasn't just one, it would be 3 or 4 all logging in at the same time. So I can only assume that our kind of listeners, our handlers, whatever, must have had instructions that every 15 minutes they were to check on what we were fucking saying.
Well,
Yeah.
I think they're welcome to listen in, aren't they?
I've invited them round for tea loads of times on air. You know what I mean? They're only just up the road. It's not, you know what I mean? You jump on a number 171 bus and they'll be round here in 15 minutes. I'll put the kettle on.
They could come round recording live.
Yeah, I'll put the kettle on and stick some skins together. They're welcome. I've got no barriers to race, creed or culture. I quite like their building.
I would like to hear from them.
Yeah.
Would they have an idea? Do they have a solution?
Yeah, well, we can have a discussion as well about why their building has to look like an owl when it's lit up at night. But
the big one on the river.
yeah,
That doesn't have a plaque on.
yeah, no.
Tom did that. No.
Tlaloc, I think it's commonly known in the occult. Have you seen it lit up at night?
Not really.
You know the owl effigy at Bohemian Grove from the footage of Bohemian Grove.
Oh yeah.
Well, essentially the MI5 building, when it's lit up at night, is Tlaloc. It's the owl effigy. It's a big bloody owl looking right over the bank of Millbank and over the halls of Westminster.
All right. So yeah, but
So-
that doesn't really symbolise anything, does it?
No, of course not. And if you look at the building, you think, you know what I mean, you look at the thing during the day and there's no... It's a very strange building. It's a very strange building. The architectural style is bizarre for such a building. You know what I mean? You really wouldn't expect a Secret Service agency to you know what I mean, be in such an overtly publicly placed building, but also for that publicly placed building to be so goddamn recognisable. You know, it's unlike any other building in London. So, and what exactly are they trying to express there? Hardly secrecy, is it?
What do you reckon as an alternative? I'll have like a matte black cube or something.
Well, but I mean, if you consider that architects design buildings to reflect the nature of the occupation that's conducted within that building, when you're talking about commercial buildings, what the hell is this bloody monstrous great big castle doing on the bank of the Thames, which looks like an owl when it's lit up at night? You know, I mean, that's just a little too odd. Robert Cybernism reckons that there's a big like triangular coven set up with all of their little secret clubs and societies with I think it's MI5, one of the like civil service departments, and one of the big bank institutes form a perfect kind of isosceles or isometric triangle. No, what is it? The equal-sided triangle.
Equilateral.
Equilateral. That's the word I was looking for. And he goes around guerrilla planting Orgonite around these places. We were discussing doing a big one in the Thames. There's a foreshore right in front of the MI5 building, and if you dig down a foot, you're going back about 700-800 years in sedimentary layers. So simply by burying some Orgonite at the depth of a shovel on the foreshore there, it would basically stay there in perpetuity, you know, until the next ice age. So
I want to ask, because I don't know if you've got contact, because apparently there's loads of it being thrown around down here.
Oh, yeah.
Because I looked into it, because I was looking into the Wilhelm Reich stuff for the Cloudless thing. And, I mean, I think solely out of spite, it's a case of, hang on, they burn books. If they burn books, I want to know what those books were.
Yeah, well, even I quote the Reich Bible that I had forced into my sweaty little palm about 25 years ago, was one of those copies that had got through the book burning, but the only way that it got through the book burning was by having all of the working drawings, all of the diagrams of the orgone accumulators removed from their pages, so it had about 4 or 5 pages that were ripped out. There's censorship for you. Yeah, why was it that they were so bloody desperate to hide that man's work?
Well, I think that was the point. It's a case of no one's had their books burned in the States. People have spoken out against them so strongly. No one's had books burned ever, bar them.
Not quite true as it goes.
Pretty much. I'm sure there's been an odd book burn.
Well, yeah, I was going to say Ulysses was one that, about the first James Joyce's Ulysses, which most people in Ireland will probably be familiar with, won't realise that the first 5 pressings of that book weren't released to the public at all. There was about 4 or 5 copies of them got out. The rest of them were all seized by various customs and port authorities and burnt as obscene material.
Right.
And if anybody thinks that bad language is a modern thing,
I tried reading Finnegan's Wake and it's confused me.
To be quite honest, from what I can delve, I've never tried Finnegan's Wake, but from what I can delve from the kind of literati, is that Ulysses was a kind of one-off, and that the rest of his work doesn't measure up at all, and I can completely understand how that would be possible, because Ulysses would have had to have been written largely in the realm of sort of semi-trance in order to be able to construct that much detail out of a single day's... You know, I mean, essentially Ulysses is one day in the life of one man, walking around the streets of Dublin, doing nothing particularly nothing particularly out of the ordinary.
Oh right, as I say, I've not read it.
And yet it's probably one of the most powerful philosophical and intellectual kind of enabling tools that I've ever come across. It exhausted me reading it. At the time, I was an absolute avid reader, would comfortably kind of trawl through a 1,000-page book in 2 days. And Ulysses, I was lucky if I could get through 10 pages a day, and it would literally knock me out unconscious. And reading 10 pages of Ulysses was like swallowing a handful of temazepam. The exertion.
But then, I think I can say once or twice on that. Certainly, I mean, because I think we talked about before Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yes.
I think the similar thing with that is you had to put that book down, you had to digest it.
I have the grave admission to make that I've never actually been able to make it through Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I've attempted it about 3 or 4 times, and the reality of it just becomes so very, very unpleasant for me. I can't.
I can equate to that. Yeah, certainly in the middle, it takes a lot to go through that, because you go through it with it quite a lot.
Well, just in case anybody's come across Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance or doesn't know what on earth we're talking about. The author of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance was regarded as one of America's finest philosophers. He was a lecturer at a university, and he began to tell his students the truth, and the government disliked his version of the truth, and so they gave him 24 doses of ECT under the mental health provision, and as a result largely wiped the man's memory clean. And a few years after sort of recovering from his supposed mental health, his mental health problems, he goes on a motorcycle road trip with his son and his best mate. And essentially the book is just the description of that road trip, and the events of the road trip are largely, I don't know if you know this, but the Phaedrus that he talks about all the way through the book, this kind of ghostly character of himself, is his pre-ECT self. And that's the ghost that he finds himself chasing throughout the book, is that he finds himself riding these roads thinking that he's just riding a nice road, and finding himself in places that he had lived as his previous self.
Yeah, I think it's very moving that it's almost disjointed when it starts. It feels like an alternative story, but you see it start to unfold and come closer.
And again, it's never actually mentioned in the book the reason why he has this sense of separation. I mean, there's no part in the book where he announces the fact that this was done unto him. And in the ignorance of that as well, people may well very, very easily miss the significance of like the shoreline scene where he's watching his son at the shoreline, and he's saying about seeing the madness that he suffered from burgeoning, blossoming in his son. And what he's actually talking about there is the sanity that he had before the ECT, and his concern isn't that his son's going to be mad. His concern is that his son is going to be as sane as he was, and isn't going to be able to keep his mouth shut, and is going to suffer the same fate as he did.
Yeah. Because, I mean, in a sense, this is, I would imagine there's a few other people out here, of you hit a brick wall if you tell the truth and you're surprised when no one wants to know about it.
Again, another brilliant book along those sort of lines is Catch-22. And many people...
Catch-22, unbelievable, but so dark at the end.
Oh, God, it's painful to read. But again, you know what I mean, anybody that's only ever seen the film will completely miss the point of Catch-22. The main character in Catch-22 is, in fact, the chief. He's the big Indian guy. And he is an ex-PSYOPs bloody CIA super soldier who's been through the Vietnam War, has killed people in more inventive ways than any human really should have any right to, and has finally decided that the only way that he can stop these fuckers from making him go and kill people that he doesn't want to kill is to pretend that he's completely insane. And
but you can't be insane.
Yeah, well, and of course the other thing, yeah, of course that's the catch. Well, that's Catch-22, isn't it? This is,
I mean, there's so many crazy...
hold on, I'm getting... One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Sorry, I've got the book name wrong. Yeah, of course, no, Catch-22 is all about... you can't get out of the army unless you're insane. You can't be insane if you say that you're insane, because then you want to get out of the army, which isn't the act of an...
If you don't want to fly, that's a sane decision.
Yeah.
So you must be sane, so you have to fly.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, I meant One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, of course, which is the set inside the insane asylum, isn't it?
Oh, I think as a book.
Yeah.
As a book, I think it's a crazy thing to understand what they will do. And it is the chief at the end. You know, the one that no one thought of. The one who was quiet in the corner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is... we were talking about this... I think it might have been Darren that I was talking to about this, just about the colour that books have brought into our lives, and we've probably read very similar kind of book lists over the years between the three of us, and it's those... The ability of the author to impart an intention through the words on the page is one thing, but the intention of the reader to extract meaning from those words is a second thing. But the thing that most people don't realise from reading books is that hemisync that's set up from the act of reading and the act of thinking about what you're reading connects the two hemispheres of the brain, and third things pop into mysterious existence, very much like I was saying with the cognitive behavioural therapy, with the writing stuff down and reading it out aloud as a therapeutic tool, that this hemisync, this co-joining of the left and right hemispheres of the brain through the act of a rational and a emotional task brings about unbidden thoughts, things that you didn't know that you were thinking, sort of thing.
No, I think that's absolutely true, and I think you made a point there of reading aloud as well.
And this is the thing about Ulysses, is that they couldn't keep the book back because there wasn't actually anything subversive on the page. The subversion was created in the mind of the reader during the process of reading, but then if you tried to refer to that in court, there would be nothing there actually on the written page. Because
ultimately, if you break it down, if you want to break it down to a legal level, it doesn't have meaning in that world, in a sense.
Like I say, it was literally, I believe that James Joyce wrote Ulysses with the firm knowledge that he would be constructing a third reality. And so all of the subversion that is encoded within the pages of Ulysses is encoded within that third reality, which isn't either in the author or in the reader or on the pages on the print on the page. It's constructed out of the three, you know what I mean, the three phases.
What a synergy.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, for me, certainly, I virtually any book that I have read I can refer to, and if I've got it on the bookshelf, I can go and grab it off the bookshelf and shuffle through and find the quote that I was looking for by remembering roughly where it was in the fall of the text. Ulysses, the number of times that I have gone to Ulysses to spout about some brilliant passage in there, to open the book at the page where the passage obviously had to have fell, and it's not bloody there. The bit before it's there, the bit that was after it's there, but the actual passage that I'm looking for doesn't bloody exist. I invented it. It was a third thing. It wasn't on the page. It wasn't me. I didn't know that I was creating it because I thought that I was reading it. Most peculiar thing, most peculiar book I've ever read. Honestly, the most peculiar book I've ever read. The section in Ulysses where he, the Bloom character, the primary character, meets the eye of a pubescent girl on the dock, and their eyes meet across the kind of the port, and in that moment, in that captured moment, there's that slight frisson of sexual tension where the girl is engaged with the sexual attention of this older man, and obviously the older man is engaged with the sexual tension of this young girl, reciprocating his gaze. And it's this most beautifully drawn analogy of the experience of the two observers, and as Bloom, as men do, go to look beyond the eyes and study the form of this prepubescent girl, his gaze is entirely attached and filled with this kind of fantasy erotica until the point at which he sees that the girl has a caliper and the spell is broken. And the most poignant part about this writing was his description of the teenage girl's experience of the moment that spell was broken, the moment that the frisson dies. And I have never felt more like a 13-year-old girl reading from the pages of a book written by a 30-year-old man than any other experience. The only comparison that I can draw is in Carlos Castaneda when he's describing the entering the spirit of a bird and looking out upon the world as a carrion and seeing the corpses of dead animals as being sparkly and attractive. And again, very similar kind of situation where the words on the page impart such well described a scenario that you're literally imparted into that scenario and experience as if it was your own experience, which is something that I know of no other. Film doesn't do it for me, music doesn't do it for me.
I think very rarely.
Yeah, well, obviously there is. Yeah, with the exception of obviously, the transcendent music, the transcendent cinema, where occasionally you will be completely transported from the here and now, but that's largely absent from the music and the film that we see in the mainstream media.
I don't know. I think you're given more scope with the book. That in a sense, you are painting your picture in your brain. You get to control it more. Regardless of what it is, and anything that engages that, it's taking you into a different world. Certainly, I would say a book more. And even now, there are Kindles around the house or anything else, but a book is different. And there's certain things that I would want to have a book to sit down and read. No way do I want to read it off a screen.
Yeah, books have a life of their own as well, I find. There's one particular book called The Cosmic Instruction Manual that I have had so many various copies pass through my hands, and they never return. They go off on little ventures. Sometimes you'll meet random people that you have no knowledge of any connection with any friends or acquaintances of theirs, and find them with your copy of the Cosmic Instruction Manual. Whenever they offer it, whenever I'm offered a copy of it back now, I immediately refuse and suggest that they do exactly the same with it as they did with me, and offer it out into the old boo. Go and get me a functional bloody lighter or something. I'll go and light this candle.
Yeah, sure.
I think we've actually had quite a lot of we seem to become a repository for Terry Pratchett moving about.
Oh yeah, nice one.
We've got loads of Terry Pratchett paperbacks.
Okay, I think Terry Pratchett. I rate Terry Pratchett as a slightly second-rate Douglas Adams.
In certain terms, and I know in certain ways he's more constructed. Douglas Adams, I think, is unbelievable.
Mm.
And I think in terms of, I mean, Douglas Adams had me, I think there's certain terms of phrases that Douglas Adams will just stop you dead. I mean, Pratchett can do that a bit. But I think it's more certain when you deal with things in terms of some of his concepts, aside from his general stories of, if you looked at like going postal and making money in terms of how you deal with banking and financial systems, he's quite plugged into it. And I just had a weird synchronicity when there were buildings burning last time round, and it was on the telly. I was actually reading one of basically what he would fully admit is a police procedural about the guards, and they were dealing with the riot there in a totally different but far better way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I must admit, I found the first few books a highly entertaining distraction.
I think in terms of, in a sense, it's, you're not going to be hit with serious challenging storylines.
Yeah. I mean, I think I probably laughed till I cried about the passage with the wizards trying to run up the observation tower and having to stop halfway for a roll-up.
There's crazy ones. I know he's done one recently about football. Now, growing up where I did, I used to really like football, but I'm not that bothered about it now, but I came back to this. But it's more around the culture of football and, it deals into football violence and different things as well. And I think there's certain things with drug issues come in. It's very peculiar the way he's dealing with it in terms of that with reality with dwarves and trolls and all sorts of other things going on.
Sorry. I can't keep doing this. I keep going to cancel out my Skype so I can actually see if anybody important is trying to get hold of me and just get random messages real fine on screen. It's completely throwing me.
Okay. I did notice I was looking in the chat box. What was it? Rich is talking about orgone accumulators. I think he said they've got plans to build one.
Oh, okay. Oh,
which I think I would really love to know. I mean, if you're talking the big full size things,
it's quite an investment. It's not a small thing to build.
I think just in terms of craft as well.
Mm. I mean, they're not difficult. They're not difficult as in. I mean, essentially, what you're making is a large capacitor. Without the connections to become an electrical capacitor. So, I mean, if you can wrap tin foil in a bit of wax paper, then you can make an orgone accumulator.
Well, in terms of an accumulator, I think he's talking about what Reich ended up doing with his cloud busting.
Mm.
I think they're looking at something on that scale. I mean, I know now they're talking about orgone blankets.
Oh yeah,
which I think are pretty much not cheap.
Okay, well, I can see how again these things could theoretically work. I'm always troubled by any investigations into Reich's work that have been done since the man's death. I'm very suspect of, but that's purely because I see an awful lot of mass marketing of, his ideas, which is something that he would have been absolutely appalled at.
And I think in terms of, if this has some sort of potency, how do you gauge it? How do you know if it's doing good or harm again?
Well, do you know about Reich's exchanges with Einstein about the orgone accumulator?
Not sure on that.
Okay, well, Reich actually sent Einstein one of his desktop orgone accumulators. To confirm or refute his experimental findings with it, and Einstein was apparently able to get exactly the same measured temperature change within the orgone accumulator as compared with the control box, and was equally odds being able to describe the nature of that temperature change as Reich was. And it was only because he was currently working on his special theory of relativity at that precise time that he kindly wrote back to Reich and said, "This is great, carry on, but I'm sorry I don't have the time to pursue the experimental work in order to be able to help you with your research." So even the great Einstein was issued with a working orgone accumulator and could not explain, found its action, its physical properties inexplicable to current science.
Mm. And then people just seem to lose interest, or they
essentially
they must have taken it so far then.
Well, the FDA took Reich, basically assassinated Reich over the manufacture and the distribution of orgone accumulators, and orgone accumulators seem to have been the larger focus of their attention. Certainly they were the pages that were removed from my book on Wilhelm Reich, were the very pages that, I now know of to have been being removed from all of his books. Any planned descriptions of orgone accumulators had to be removed. And it's just a little piece of history there. I believe that he was originally, funny enough, he was actually imprisoned doing very much the Freeman route. Did you know? I don't know if you know about this, but when the American government, the FDA, initially tried to take him to court over his claims that he was making, the medical claims that he was making about some of his equipment, Reich basically refused to acknowledge the authority of the court refused to acknowledge the ability of the court to assess the validity of his work.
I remember that. I think he wrote him a letter, didn't he?
Yeah.
He wrote him a letter, basically said, this is beyond your jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Because I'm dealing with science.
That's it. And so as a result, they threw him into jail for contempt. He was never actually remanded or tried for any offence, and funnily enough, he died in prison, I think 2 days before his release from the contempt charge.
Oh right, because I think it was almost a year, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, I think he was actually in jail for a bit longer than that, because there was while he was being held for contempt, there was the whole incident with orgone accumulators being shipped in Canada and crossing the American border in New York State because of the wiggly nature of the border and the straight nature of the road. The driver had set off from Canada to go to Canada and hadn't crossed through any American border posts, but because he'd transported orgone accumulators through a state of America, that put Reich again into trouble with this contempt charge, because he'd actually stopped the transportation and manufacture of orgone accumulators in America, and that was how I think he ended up with 3 or 4 years actually.
Oh right, I know he didn't last out in prison.
Yeah, no,
I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah,
and from what I had, I think there was a bit of a setup on that, wasn't there, about having it shipped over a certain line?
Yeah. Well, again, it's entirely possible that the reason why that was shipped by, on that particular road was a conspiracy to get him into fucking trouble. So.
Mm.
And as to the Cloudbusters as well, anybody that has actually read the works of Wilhelm Reich and know his incredible successes with Cloudbusters, please stop pointing them at the sky and expecting clouds to go away. Because if they do, you've got it wrong. you've wired it up the wrong way round. Reich was actually sued by local farmers in Arizona during the Arizona Dust Bowl years, when there'd been no rain for like 5 years and crops were just dying in the fields. Farmers were starving, going out of business. Reich built a cloudbuster, got a farmer to let him use it, and the farmer's fields were so lush and green that from the amount of rainfall that he created, that the local farmers surrounding the area claimed that the reason why all of their crops were failing was because Reich was stealing their rain, and he was actually forced by a court of law to stop greening a farm during the Dust Bowl.
Mm. Yeah, you can believe it though.
There's also been some suggestion that cloudbusters were used to fill the Aswan Dam. That if you actually look into the pre-Aswan Dam flow rates of that river, and how long it would have taken to fill the Aswan Dam, you will find that it would have still been half empty now. And the suggestion is that that cloudbusters were used for creating wide-scale rainfall in the area, and some of the satellite imagery of the Aswan Dam briefly after it was its inauguration shows like watery dunes off to either side of the dam, nowhere near anywhere that the water table could have got to, showing just how much the rainfall had increased in that area during the time.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm just looking at chat because I think Rich is talking about. I think he's saying they're building a full size one. I think because you actually use tubes running into a stream. You know, this whole big thing, and it's a case of I think Bitch and Bob made the point of we don't really need more clouds. You know, if it can work the right way around and disperse some, I think people might be happier. But I don't know.
Yeah, again. Certainly Reich would have had his cloudbusters earthed preferably into moving water anyway.
Yeah.
So, and again, one has to wonder again here about the intent. You see, if you're a scientist and you research something and your researches show that a certain thing should be possible, and then you follow that possibility, that theoretical possibility to the extent of actually constructing a large-scale bloody machine and putting your reputation on the line as to the effectiveness of that machine, you've constructed an enormous reality field, an enormous probabilistic statistical reality field pointing in the direction of your results returning your expected responses. And this is what I was saying about the likes of MMS, that I don't believe that Jim Humble is necessarily a quack for what he's claiming about MMS. What I would suggest is that it's probably almost impossible for anybody to actually duplicate those effects from MMS simply because they don't have his belief structure. And that the reason for his responses from that particular substance was because he would have had subjective experience that had accumulated over time with utilising this thing that he thought was a medicine. And it's in fact his belief in its ability to cure people that would have been curing people, and so would have been curing people of things far beyond the scope of the actual substance itself. And so it's only once you actually get outside of the direct sphere of influence of that person and that person's beliefs that suddenly this thing that's a great medicine and is saving all of these lives and doing all of this good suddenly becomes a poison in everybody else's hands. You see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, you have to check things out. Because ultimately, if you're going to if someone wants to do something, it's a case of check this out and do your research. And double check it.
Well, more to the point, do your negative research. This is something that I've learned.
Absolutely.
This is something that I've learned very keenly over the recent times, and especially with so much misinformation and disinformation apparently being put out over the means of the electronic media, that essentially we do have to question everything that we're given, and certainly the more different directions I see a single idea suddenly and miraculously appearing from, I want my corroboration of a rule. I want to go digging into that and find that there are more than 3 original sources for that material, and I do that through the means of syntax and of deduction and of comparative deduction. And again, like I say, if necessary, going and doing a negative search, so you find the thing that you want to find the truth for and you go looking for the lies about it, or vice versa.
Well, even if it's a case of that may be propaganda against it, what are they actually saying? And does that stack up?
Yeah, precisely.
Can you get a decent independent source on anything?
And this is essentially, I tend to, I work in the absence of information as well now. We are so saturated by details about every infinite minutiae of life that if you can do a Google search or a Gerudo search like I do and return almost no results, then you can almost guarantee that something's being covered up. You know what I mean? So often my researches tend to be follow the hole in the data. rather than necessarily finding suitable data and following the truth of it. It's simply a matter of finding the absence of data, or getting the absence of data and finding out why or how deep that absence of data goes, and how the lack of it can explain the situation somehow.
I think sometimes it's certain things. If you look at something specifically, like I've seen a little bit of, there's been quite a few big civil servants resign, and I think now that may not mean anything. They may just got to an age, but I thought at the moment, are there any more going to go? But I think.
Oh, you there, Nick?
Bits of information.
Oh, you're back again. Sorry, Nick, you dropped out for a few seconds there. What was that you said?
Oh, it's just you see certain things in news items, and like a couple of things happen of, like some guy jumps off. The guy jumped off the building in the art gallery. Which was a bit weird.
Yeah, I was looking at that one the other day. Yes, very odd.
And it's certain little things like that, and then people quit, and you read it, and I don't think no one ever leaves to spend time with their family. They have more subtle things that are going on, but it's trying to read between the lines on things.
Yeah, like the MI5 agent that got found zipped into a suitcase surrounded by SIM cards in the bathtub of his locked flat. Well, yeah, and ultimately these sort of things leak out more because people have cameras on phones, and if things seem to happen. Well, this is it. I mean, we talk about being watching it. Well, we talk about being in a surveillance society, but I would suggest that surveillance society is actually largely the directional arrow of that surveillance is more predominantly pointed in our direction, because between us we have an infinitely larger mass of camera and recording equipment that we all walk around with in our pockets now. Well, exactly. I mean, it's, in a way, some of it's ridiculous. I think in terms of if you go and look over the internet that you can get spy cameras in pens and voice recorders in tiny little places. All that stuff is there, but that's what we've got available. That's not what they've got. They've got probably far better kit than anything we could ever expect to see. Well, you say that, but don't forget that I'm actually in the bit. Well, I'm not now, seeing as I've now retired my last client in the AV business, but I would still accept AV work if it was to be offered my way. But having worked in the AV industry, the professional AV industry is technology driven, and the amount of money in kit, the kind of cost of kit, means that R&D is way and above anything that you would see for domestic kit. And I can tell you that professional kit is largely the same as domestic kit now. Apart from a difference of scale. Difference in wattage, difference in matters of that nature. The electronics revolution is largely grinding to a halt, and now it's more a matter of what we do with those electronics. I think you'll find this whole business. The whole kind of what was it? The bloody what was the dodgy spy movie with all the little creepy spiders, the nanobots and stuff like that that'd get you. And they've looked. If you actually look into the science, if you go and research the science on nanotechnology, what you actually find is that they've reduced these essentially mechanical components down to their atomic minimum scale, so that you've got like cogwheels where the centre of the cogwheel is one atom, and the 6 teeth of the cog another 6 atoms, making 7 atoms in total for a cog. Yeah. Well, in theory, you could put that up against another cog and turn it and make a machine. But the problem that they've found is that on this small scale, physics gets very fuzzy. And what they've actually found is that none of the cogs will actually turn because of something called stiction. The smaller you make something, the less granular its surface, the more it it atomically bonds with its neighbouring surface. And so they've made all of these magical little micro nano machines that all fascinating and could theoretically produce a little nanobot that could crawl down your throat and infect your brain, unfortunately the poor fucker would be completely paralysed because none of its cogs would turn.
But, you know, they're looking way far ahead. I assume, you know, miniaturised drones, even if they have to build them out of small technology.
Well, again, yes and no, because you have to take into consideration that the current science cannot even explain how a bumblebee can stay in flight. That the what's in, what's out equation doesn't work for the humble bumblebee, and probably even less so for something like a fly. So if you're wanting to make a mechanical replicant of a fly, you have to go into realms of physics that just simply aren't invented yet. You can't make a power plant small enough to drive an engine of any significance to be able to make a fly's wings flap and fit it into something the size of a fly. You might be able to do it with something the size of a car. You know what I mean, with like a little nuclear power plant and this and that and the other that you would need, but there just simply isn't the technology. And this is the thing as well, is that I actually read the raw science papers. I don't read the you know what I mean, the mainstream media's dissemination of science. I go to like sort of New Scientist and Nature and magazines like that, where you're actually seeing current science being peer reviewed. And that this is something that a lot of people don't understand, is that the science that we're presented with has to go through a process of peer review, where it has to be published in the public domain for the scientific community at large to contemplate it, and then the result of that contemplation by the scientific community at large is that if it can be found to be a faulty theory, then that will then be discussed with a reply again within the public domain. Essentially, if you get New Scientist, you'll read articles in it one week where you've got a particular group of scientists that are publishing a particular set of results, and 2-3 weeks later, maybe several months later, you'll have a competing group of scientists will have worked upon those results and will have either agreed with them and found that their results concurred with the previous results, or that their results make the previous results to be out to be wrong. And this is how the process of peer review works, and this is how modern science has essentially come about. So you know, we certainly are seeing. If you read those papers, you don't see the kind of born identity, you know what I mean, all of this kind of beyond modern technology. It simply doesn't exist. There's certainly very little evidence out there for it existing. I'm sure that the military have got patents for stuff that, you know what I mean, we would probably make great use of in the general public, that they're not letting go of because they're of military strategic importance. But yeah, no, largely speaking, I mean, we can look at the example of the Second World War and see the dissemination of technology directly from military use into peacetime use and into what we're using right now, the internet and the electronics revolution that came from largely from developments during the war. And this again dials back into this thing of beneficence. This is something that has always troubled me, that the by far the most profitable time for humanity, technologically wise, is during periods of great warfare. And it almost struck me that if you're going to want to see the technological advances that are being called for the late 21st century, that the only way that we're going to acquire those technologies is to carry on being at war. But that's in ignorance of this digital virtual reality model, wherein we no longer need the premise of somebody dropping bombs on our head to invent a good shelter, to invent some new building material for the future. We can do that without it.
Oh, I think you've got to try and get realism into it as well, of looking at certain things. And I think it's great to investigate stuff, but I want to know so much more about so many things. You know, if someone is going to look at orgone energy, I want to hear about results and different things and what they feel about it. But there's so many things out there. I'd like to look at so many other things. people talk about hydrogen energy. I don't think anyone's really cracked that.
Well, again, yes, there's certainly elements of science that would appear to be being restrained by the dogma that's built into the scientific community. There are certain things that you do not dispute. You know what I mean? So, in any scientific forum, which includes any element of dogma, of course you're never actually going to get to the truth. You're only going to get to elements of the truth that are allowed for within the scope of the pre-established dogma, which again is where the likes of Tom Campbell just completely blows the lid off of that, because he says, yeah, okay, well, we'll just have the dogma within, you know what I mean, as a subset within a larger sequence.
Well, the one thing I think is the Dr. Wakefield thing, in that he's not advocated not having vaccines, but got kicked out even just for, discussing, I think we said in terms of a multiple vaccine, said it may not be safe to have all of them, you might want to have them separately spread over time. Yeah. Just for that alone, you see that, there is again, there's a double-sided thing to peer review that can close ranks.
But I suppose, yes, definitely peer review has its problems, and certainly, again, like I say, with this kind of dogmatic approach, I mean, things like climate change, you can't get a decently peer-reviewed climate change article now because the dogma within the scientific community is that we accept climate change as a functioning model, which it certainly isn't yet. You know what I mean? So.
Oh, I think it was taken as read. I got very steamed. I think the BBC did something, and they said, it's considered over in the really naughty corner. Yeah. Climate change is considered in the really naughty corner, along with paedophiles and flat earthers.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And it's a case of, no, that's just crazy.
Oh, look at David Bellamy. You know what I mean? David Bellamy, one time, you know what I mean, beloved of the BBC in virtually every nature programme on the BBC at any time, says one thing out against. He didn't even dispute climate change. He just said that there should be an open debate on it. Cut from the BBC, completely ostracised from the scientific community. Well, you got so many examples of this. You've got Eric Laithwaite was ostracised from the scientific community for mounting a pendulum on a roller skate. There you go.
How did he get that one? I remember him with all the maglev stuff.
That's the one. He used to be on the BBC.
Why pendulum on roller skate? What? I don't remember that one.
He mounted a pendulum at 90 degrees to the axis of the roller skate, and by swinging the pendulum, the roller skate would initially rock backwards and forwards, and then once it had kind of settled into a direction of motion, it would carry on in that direction of motion, stopping in between scoots, and would carry on across the, you know what I mean, across the desk or whatever in a single direction. And again, Eric's question was how.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He'd already had like 8-year-old children lifting 180-pound gyroscopes over their head on a 4-foot pole, which, you know what I mean, your average Jeff Capes wouldn't be able to do without the gyroscope spinning. And yet, if you put the child into a rotating chair, they can lift 180 pound of steel above their head with one hand.
I mean, I have to say, I remember seeing him as a kid when they did those Royal Institute lectures, and I think some of the stuff he did would blow people away.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I mean, they should still be repeating. You know what I mean? Even in the absence of the great man himself, they should be repeating those children's lectures because they open so many bloody minds.
Mm. And I think as well, I mean, you say in terms of David Bellamy, because I think I saw some DVDs where he talked after he'd gone through everything, and you could see the guy was devastated. They'd taken everything away from him, and to listen to him, because he did lay it out. This guy wasn't just TV. He wasn't like a lot of people on TV who were TV presenters who might have had a background somewhere. He was, he was a book scientist. He'd been writing about ecology and environments and things, and people didn't have a clue.
Yeah.
He was doing it when, it was him and the good life.
Oh, Eric Laithwaite was the inventor of the maglev train. So
Eric Laithwaite was nuts, but we had a tradition of that in this country, hovercrafts. I mean, if you say in terms of war, what was it, Barnes Wallis? If you put aside what it actually did, the crazy way people went about things and opened up possibilities, how most of these things drove things forward, I do not know. But I think Kaz was saying, like, gyroscope power.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the only problem with gyroscope power is that it needs an extra dimension to act through. It needs to be able to act through 90 degrees. Yeah. Which is the reason why it can't necessarily be utilised for very many... it's one of those intriguing things about, about the nature of the Newtonian mechanical world, that gyroscopes do all these weird and wonderful things, but apart from kind of like gyroscopically stabilising rockets and making sure that your compass is pointing in the right direction, there's not really a great deal of use for much.
But then isn't it at least worth showing people stuff like this and saying, look, this is what this does?
Oh, definitely.
I mean, we have no idea, what we're going to do with it, but it does this.
Yeah, well, I mean, even
just
the general kind of promoting of gyroscopes as an intellectual device, to my mind, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Eric Laithwaite hadn't have been at least partly responsible in the development of the gyroscope-driven bus. And although it was only ever put into experimental service, there was an entire route set up. I think it was in Birmingham or Manchester, and they had this bus that would drive from bus stop to bus stop with a bloody great big, I think it was a 5-ton gyroscope slung underneath, which was magnetically impulsed from electromagnets embedded in the bus stops that were triggered by the bus's arrival. So each time it pulled up at a bus stop, it would switch on the magnetic coils underneath the bus, which would then spin up the gyro a bit more and put the power back in for it to get to the next bus stop.
Yeah.
And I've noticed as well that even though that experiment hasn't been rolled out, that if you actually look into the very latest of transcontinental bus technology, they've actually now done a diesel over gyroscopic design where, in fact, the gyroscope is small enough to be installed in the rear axle of the bus, and essentially is used as a battery for braking force. So instead of applying a friction material to slow the bus down, the initial slowing down of the bus, I think, is done through bringing electromagnets together, and then the impulse from that sort of electromagnetically clutched braking system then drives the gyroscope up to speed, and then when the bus pulls away again, it utilises the gyroscope to overcome the inertia of stopping a huge great big lorry.
I get you on that, yeah.
Brilliant at last.
I mean, in terms of, I know, like, with you want to change an alternator to permanent magnets. I think if you make them too strong, you get a cogging. You do get a resistance on it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, braking force generates power.
Mm. Mm. Well, essentially, it's actually the same as the KERS system on modern Formula 1 cars. That they use exactly the same system, counter-rotating gyroscopes mounted somewhere sort of within the transmission system that are driven up by the first application of the brake, and they use that to reclaim sort of 4 or 5 brake horsepower for the top speed. Mm. Very smart. We're back on air. It's Freeman Jack and Nik Gnomic shooting the breeze about all sorts of things on a Thursday evening. Just a little thing that popped up in the chat there before we went to a tune break. Where somebody mentioned, asked me if I would mention the Reich kind of discoveries in what he described as Dior, which he figured was the kind of opposite force to orgone. And the way that this came about was, I think it would have been around sort of 1910, 1915, possibly a little later. No, it would have been later, because he would have been would have still been in the Austrian School of Psychiatry then. It must have been in the sort of mid-20s, somewhere around then. It was quite early on in Reich's experimental career. that he decided to see what would happen if he introduced a radioactive isotope to an orgone accumulator. And in his notes, I believe that 2 of his lab technicians died almost immediately, and his entire laboratory staff, including himself, became immediately incredibly ill, and apparently reports were being made from neighbouring towns up to 5 kilometres away of just feeling absolutely awful. And Reich was supposed to have suffered from ill health from that experiment to the day that he died. Serious ill health. And as a result, he looked into the possibility of there essentially being a negative isotope of orgone, I guess. And that he, like I say, described this as Dior or death orgone, or the opposite of the biological urge. I don't know really quite where to go with that, other than just to say that Reich discovered it, and it's certainly worth considering if you're experimenting with any orgone devices. Is that it's very possible that these things act essentially like a lens. Oh, Michael, take this up to your mum, please.
Yeah, sure.
In fact, 1 second. Hold on. Let me just snap a bit of this. And even with simple things. Yeah, no, that's right. Look. Just take all these up in one. Yeah, take that. Just knock everything over in the process. There you go.
I'm
and
special.
Yes, I know. You're very special in a very special sort of way.
That's rude.
Perfectly true, though. You can't call it rude.
I'm special. I don't care.
Everybody's special.
Yeah, no, Michael has his own special way of being special.
Oh,
For God's sake, open the door.
Is this bastard door?
Yes,
It's
and your
true.
incapacity, your inability to actually use.
laying doors. We can't open it.
Yeah, alright, okay, I know it hasn't got
Put
a door
hand
handle on it.
there.
Yes, I know.
Just a handle, not even a knob. Just a handle.
Yeah, alright, okay.
Stick
Yeah.
something. Shut up.
Go the hell away. Or possibly you could actually hold everything in one arm and still have a free hand. But Michael seems to be incapable of that particular function. Yes, no. Right. Michael's brother ruminating about him in the background. Yes, I don't really know where to go with that, other than to caution people that Reich stumbled upon this experimentally, and that if you believe that you may be under the influence of negative energy fields, be they telephone masts or whatever, that it certainly could be worth considering that your orgone device may just as well amplify those negative effects as ameliorate them, and that this is definitely something I think is worth thinking about. But again, we come back into this belief thing. You know, I know that Cabbages Orgonite works. I can't scientifically identify any reason why Cabbages Orgonite works, but I can feel Cabbages Orgonite. We've measured Cabbages Orgonite. We've put bits of Cabbages Orgonite in glasses of water and frozen them, and had inch-long bloody spikes of ice appearing out of the middle of the bloody glass of water.
Well, I'm not going to dismiss it. We've got some orgonite mushrooms.
Uh-huh.
I think there's like I think there's a pyramid, cone, I think a couple of different shapes.
Yeah, well,
on copper in the veg. But unfortunately, the weather's wiped out most of it. So whether they're having a good effect or not, I do not know.
Yeah.
I think the weather's overcome it anyway.
yeah. Well, certainly the all of my broadcasts on TNS have been largely orgone fueled. I'm sitting within about 4 feet of possibly some of the most potent bloody orgonite creations ever known to mankind. When Sibes arrived for this latest batch, I actually had to get him to separate the groups of pendants and to actually move them apart, because the energetic content of the room was actually becoming quite unpleasantly intense with them all accumulated in one spot.
Oh no, I think I would believe you could get that.
I mean, this is the other thing as well. My experience of a lot of Cabbages stuff is that many people actually can't wear it at all. that it's too potent. In fact, one of his early batches, there's very few people that have actually been able to sustain having one of them pendants around their neck, because the physical sensation of wearing the pendant has been so omnipresent, and it never quite gets to uncomfortable or to painful, but the sensation can be so strong that it can certainly be uncomfortable. And certainly for me, before I forgave my particular pendant, which was out of that batch, which was one of the batches that, like I say, when we put it in the bottom of a glass of water, produced an inch-long spike of ice out of the middle of this perfectly flat glass of water, which, from a submerged depth of about 1.5 inches.
That's pretty awesome. I'm wondering what you say from that. Is that then a matter of scale? In that pendant, you could maybe hang that in the middle of a room to do a whole room if it's got a certain amount of energy to it, and scale it down again. Can he scale down a pendant even further in Orgonite?
It would be hard to know exactly where to go with that. I mean, certainly Sibes's stuff, I can say for anybody considering getting Orgonite, get in touch with me, because I can say with abject hand on heart that this man makes absolutely no money out of the manufacturing of his Orgonite, and actually loses money because he gives most of it away or goes and gifts it by going and digging holes and planting it around police stations and mobile phone towers and shit.
I think that's wonderful. But
I've just got this mental impression. I've only ever been told it. I've never been out with him on night manoeuvres. But Sibes goes out in full camo with a little rucksack on, with a little shovel poking out, and he just does all his Orgonite gifting in the middle of the night. So he's like creeping around police stations in the middle of the night, digging little holes in their flower beds and burying bits of Orgonite in it. And he's saying, why don't the police ever stop me and ask me what I'm doing? Because I'm desperate to tell them.
Well, you want to get arrested, you actually want to stand there with a straight face and explain it to them.
Sibes is a lovely man. He really is a genuinely lovely man. We had a hysterical... we took him for a New Year's Eve party around to a friend of ours, and she hadn't really had a great deal of contact with the sort of cyber hippie community, and in the kind of miasma of the night's party, she hadn't really had a chance to get to know him. And Sibes is a complete casualty. Whatever he takes, he just gets completely zonked out by it, much more so than anybody else I've ever met. And as a result, he was incapable of being taken home at the end of the party, so we had to leave him on this girl's floor. And we got this text when we got home. Oh my God, who have you left in my flat? Oh, is he safe? And then we got this second text a few hours later when she'd woken up and actually met him in person. Oh, he's so lovely! Sibes, mostly harmless.
I think that's what everyone wants to aspire to, though.
Yeah.
Mostly harmless. That's got to be an accolade.
Yeah.
I'm with that. I mean, excuse me, I was sending you links for Doodism.
Yes, it's great.
And I am gobsmacked that Elena has not watched that film.
Right, moral of the story, Orgonite, safe or risky? Where can you get... Right, okay, well I would suggest that providing that you are prepared to live a very moral and altruistic life, then surrounding yourself with Orgonite is a perfectly good and wise thing to do. It seems to have a passive interaction with any kind of energetic flow and will largely apparently amplify whatever's going on. So providing that you keep your mind clean and your intentions clear, and like I say, relatively altruistic, then surrounding yourself with Orgonite is a perfectly suitable thing to do. If you're the sort of person that likes to think that you're wonderful but probably actually under the surface aren't actually that kind of altruistic, it might be worth avoiding it, because from experience, people who aren't particularly community minded tend to find it very unpleasant to wear. The physical sensation of having it near them is off-putting. And I can entirely understand how that can be, because at times, you know what I mean, through some of these stronger pieces, the subjective experience of wearing one of Syge's kind of overstrength batch pendants for a matter of 6 months was that it was a bit like having a piece of sort of 2-inch thick sailing rope pulled through your solar plexus. And if you moved it from your solar plexus, where it sort of hung naturally, and moved it to another part of your body because that part was becoming a little sort of tender from this experience, the sensation would simply transfer to where you'd moved it to.
I think you would have to just go on instinct on that and say no. I mean, you know, if you don't feel comfortable with it, you don't wear it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the long and the short of it. And as far as orgone accumulators go, I think as long as you're not planning on experimenting with putting any radioactive isotopes in there, then orgone accumulators are entirely positive. I mean, Reich's work with the terminally ill cancer patients was just absolutely phenomenal. And why?
I'd say generally handle with care. I mean, I think there was one in terms of what they were talking of on their design of the big one Earth to a stream. I think Wright did report one of someone who actually touched the tubes while it was in action and got seriously ill. So, you know, these are serious toys.
Yeah, yeah,
No,
absolutely.
It's not something you want to play around with. You want to be very careful and think about everything and try and be as safe as you can.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I don't really see any way that you can quite sort of avoid the large-scale experiment of stepping into your first orgone accumulator and discovering what it does to you. But there weren't a lot of reports of people having unpleasant experiences from orgone accumulators. You might find when the reason that he got into so much trouble into America was his reports on the sexual responses of frigid middle-class women upon stepping into one, and that was how, you know, the orgasmatron in was it Marty Feldman? What's the bloody movie? Was it Barbarella?
Oh, Barbarella, yeah.
Yeah, with the orgasmatron. Well, the orgasmatron was essentially the filmmaker's representation of the orgone accumulator, the effect that the orgone accumulator was reputed to give. But this was in a very limited number of cases, and Reich largely documented these as being patients that he was treating for various degrees of neurosis and sexual misfunction. And upon stepping into the orgone accumulator, the first thing that they experienced was something orgasm-like. And that this became blown out of proportion by the kind of mainstream media. Reich was very clear about it. He saw it as being the redressing of a previous imbalance in their energetic flow, and that energetic flow being so key to sexual function and health, that the sensation was that of a sexual orgasm without the kind of sexual stimulation.
That would make some sort of sense. I think I know you made a point. I actually had it I think I came back from Glastonbury with gastroenteritis, and I couldn't eat for like 4 days. But I think by day 5, when I'd start to eat light foods, I actually felt amazingly high.
Yeah.
You know, I think in terms of fasting.
Yeah.
And, you know, you said about that sort of experience. You know, you can have all sorts of ways of going about that.
Yeah, well, and like I say, it's hard now for me to say with any certainty if the effects that Reich was getting from his orgone accumulators weren't entirely driven by his ability to project a reality field of his own creating, and that the strictness of his scientific discipline isn't enough to convince the likes of me of its scientific efficacy, thereby enabling my ability to detect the strength or weakness of an orgone device, which if I put into the hands of somebody who hasn't done the research, who doesn't sort of believe in Reich's work, can't feel it.
But I think the other.
I mean, I've done my very best to do subjective tests on this, or I suppose even more objective tests on this, where I literally don't tell people what it is and just issue people with Orgonite and find out whether or not it's anything.
Yeah.
And the remarkable results have been the likes of Westy, who I didn't preempt at all, but admittedly he was quite out of his gourd at the time on a load of MDMA, and he picked it up and threw it back on the table. Said it gave him something like an electric shock. And he really didn't want to go anywhere near it afterwards. And this was, I mean, my first experience of, in fact, it was that very piece, the piece that I still have kicking around, I don't know where it is at the minute, it'll be in the room somewhere, but the original piece that Sibes gave me, in the Zen Buddhist park in the grounds of the National War Museum, very odd place to meet, in the Dalai Lama's Zen Buddhist garden, just under the 15-inch guns. Really peculiar fucking place. But yeah, when I first put the thing in my hands and sort of clasped it between my two hands, I had this most peculiar sensation of like creeping slow electricity. And it essentially made a circuit that it kind of slowly trickled up one arm and round the elbow and across up and over the shoulder and round me back down the other arm. And when it made a circuit, it felt like I'd just been, just been plugged into something. Very peculiar. And I certainly don't think that there was at that specific time. I mean, the 2 seconds before Sibes put this thing in my hand, I've been organising to meet him for months over the TPUC. We'd already made a couple of dates to meet up and had missed each other for whatever reason. And sort of all of this culminated in him reaching into his bag for this first piece of Orgonite and me just thinking, oh my God, what if it's just a fucking, like a blank piece of plastic? What if I can't feel anything? What am I going to say to this guy? You know what I mean? Am I going to kind of bluff it out and go, oh, well, I can't feel very much, or am I just going to be honest with him and say, it feels like a bit of plastic? And so all of these thoughts are kind of churning through my mind when I've taken this thing in my hand, and the last thing I expected was to actually feel something really, you know what I mean, very physical.
Yeah.
So, don't know quite what to say about Orgone. Again, it has to be considered, the belief framework, the preconception framework has to be considered, and although I've obviously, you know what I mean, with the objective experimentation with issuing it to people that have no expectation of it, and for their experiences to be similar, if at all, they either simply get the same thing from it or nothing at all from it. So they either pick it up and go, no, don't feel anything, or they pick it up and go, ooh, what's that? Why does it do that? Where's the battery?
But I think how much can you account for the spirit of the person who made it?
Well, precisely, and this is the thing. I mean, Sibes literally the lengths. You know, I mean, Sibes will go to we actually had to tell Sibes to make them visibly attractive, because all of the ones that he'd been turning out and trying to sell looked like a like a dog turd on a lead. It's just like this brown blob of plastic with no distinguishing features, you know what I mean? Medium grey brown blob of plastic with no distinguishing features, you know what I mean? He's expecting to sell these to party people, you know what I mean? But inside was a completely different matter, because inside he's doing all of these intricate little coils of silver wire with specific crystal beads being twisted up in the bit of wire and all made up into a little antenna array inside, and he carefully mounts all of these in the mould as he's making it, and the actual contents of the Orgonite itself is like a mixture of organic and metallic materials, and he goes out and buys the finest titanium powder, or I mean, he actually spends a fortune on the materials for these things, and you can't actually see that any of it's in there.
Can't he get clear?
Well, the issue is that because he's a cyber hippie, he doesn't want to use all the polyester resins, so he uses natural organic resins.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's...
Can't he get stuff nearer the surface or something?
Well, no, again, he has perfected it, yeah. No, he's started doing that and sort of embedding sort of silver objects right at the surface and then polishing back to them. Has been working. He did quite a nice little butterfly range with a little kind of lacework silver butterfly embedded in the surface, and then kind of sanding it back so it was smooth and flat on the surface. Very nice. Now he's doing. He does his girly ranges now for the girlies, because he was being very much a man about it, and everything was all very factual and all very mechanistic. And he wondered why nobody was particularly interested in buying them for him.
I think the girlies would be more into it. They'd probably pick it up better.
Well, certainly, yeah, this would seem to be the case. I mean, my one went to Orgone energised Tamara's baby throughout her pregnancy, and that is seriously the most unusual baby I have ever come across, bar none. I mean, this baby is so switched on, so clued up, so chilled out, and she is still a bloody baby. I mean, really, baby in arms, like whatever she is now, 6, 9 months old, whatever she is. And just, I mean, hardly ever cries. If she cries, it's because she's hungry, you know what I mean? Completely, like, kind of open-eyed at the world.
I'd really like to know, to be honest, because we have Orgonite, but that's outdoors. Now, I don't know, and I can't remember if I've read it or somewhere because it's going back a bit. If you have it indoors, does it actually lose energy?
Well, like I
At
say,
some point, I believe.
well, like I say, I don't see them as an energetic source. I simply see them as a lens, as a lensing device. So, in that respect, no, they should work equally well indoors as out. And the only thing that you might need to consider in that respect is that the biological, energetic atmosphere of indoors, if it isn't positivity and light, the orgone may well lens the lack of positivity.
I mean, I think in terms of that, if it has some sort of significant effect, it's worth giving it a go. If you can deal with the energy, if the energy feels right. And I think, I mean, in some ways, that's turning on to certain things. I know when I've got very determined on certain courses, I have to actually take stuff out of where I'm living. If I've had stuff that I've accumulated off certain people, I think, hang on, their energy was bad.
Yeah.
And I've actually, fortunately, if you've even at times it's a case of I just have to put that in the garden shed. And I want to see if if the place will quieten down.
Well, I mean, and again, this would be entirely in keeping with the plastic reality model, because the vibrational state of a previous owner would be imparted to any substance, because the very substance, the very material substance of that thing would have been made up by their belief in its existence.
Yeah, and I think lots of objects. Where we've had certain friends, or they've given us something or made something, it's a case of they have meaning in terms of that person. You can appreciate that even on a standard level, but I think there's more to that, the spirit that's gone in. I mean, you look, because I was going to propose, if you want to do orgone energy, you build the small box, and I said maybe energise the water, and I thought, but hang on, I'm thinking to the Japanese guy in the case of, well, you can energise water anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in terms of how can you validate any sort of science in that?
Well, and this was the reason why I gave my orgone pendant away, was simply because I have, since discovering Reich's work, have essentially considered myself to be a conduit for orgone, and don't really need a lens to be able to do that for me. I'm quite capable of understanding the nature and the flow of energy through my body and manipulating it accordingly. And it's really all about throughput. This is the thing with chi, is that with any kind of biological energy, it's not something that can be stored up like electricity in a battery. It's like the rain; it has to be a throughput. It has to go back to the sea.
Well, I think in a sense, it all has to flow. Like a water flow, it has to have a cycle, and it has to be made, used up, returned to where it came from. That is generally, that is just a natural cycle. And, you talk about chi, and I know people from, martial arts who have a very different take on how it works, but I've seen some of the things they can do with chi energy, and they can sometimes do very strange things.
Yeah, very much so. Very, very much so. And tangible, provable, on camera sort of things.
Yes.
I mean,
I've
just noticed Mahatma in the chat there, and of course, keeping it real as ever. Does an orgone have to be grounded, i.e. on the ground, and not around your neck? Well, no, not specifically. The orgone cloud busting device worked better if it was earthed into a running stream, but in fact most of the other orgone devices relied on a capacitance effect, whereby insulators were wrapped in conductors and out up to a multiple layer, and supposedly the more layers that you got in, the more potent the capacitance was for orgone. So no, certainly there was no earth strap involved in the use of orgone accumulators. In fact, they relied on the very fact that they were insulated in order to theoretically accumulate orgone energy. So I would suggest that
generally you've got two different machines going on, didn't you, with the cloud busting?
Oh God, yeah. Well, a cloud buster has no real connection with an orgone accumulator at all, except for the fact that they're both devices for registering the same sort of energy. So,
okay. In modern parlance, orgone accumulator would be Hawkwind. Cloud busting is K-Bush. They're in certain videos on YouTube. You can find them.
Yeah.
That's the simple short on, don't you think? Instead of typing links in.
Yeah. I must admit, having discovered the works of Wilhelm Reich, I realised just how switched on the likes of Hawkwind were back in the day. And I wonder where they must have stumbled upon it from, because I know that that stuff was buried deep. I've stumbled across this stuff. It's all out there on the internet now. But I stumbled across this stuff by having books pressed into my sweaty hand by people that didn't understand them and thought that I could. Which has happened on more than one occasion. Here, Jack, read this for me. I've got not a clue what it's about, but it looks really important.
All right, but that's a challenge in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're approaching that with that reality of, is this going to be something of importance then? If it's going to be hard work, is it worth it?
Yeah. Oh, blimey. Have you noticed the time?
No.
Oh, look.
I'm too stoned.
Look at the bloody time.
23. Are we finished?
We've been going for 3 hours.
You joking me?
Oh, no, I'm certainly not. Doesn't time fly when you're not watching the clock?
Altered reality. Altered states. Definitely.
Very much so. Well, I'm minded. I'm pretty much talked out anyway myself. I've got to save some sort of larynx for the Tom Campbell of next week. Yes, folks, Tom Campbell next week, ex-NASA physicist, statistician, and all-round beardy good guy.
I'm going to be there for this.
Yeah, oh God, I'm so excited. I can't tell you. I really can't. I'm like a kid in a sweet shop.
Oh, what a better way to pass a Thursday night.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. And it sounds from his communications as well, like he's very much up for this being a completely sort of unscripted, natural conversation. So it's not even like one of these speakers that will just come on and only wants to give their take. I'll probably have to devote, a fairly significant portion of the programme to him simply describing the MBT. But that's just, just as a way of qualifying what's to come later, really.
But I think, this is a case of, he knows what he's talking about, he can just go with it.
Well, this is basically what you said. I offered to send him all my questions in advance so he'd have some time to contemplate them at length rather than to be expected to reply to them, off the cuff. And he's sent back and said, no, it's just sometimes just as much fun to do it off the cuff. So,
but I think, doesn't that make for awesome? I think the one thing that caught me not too long ago, Rick Simpson was on.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think when he was on, they just sat there and he just talked. And people dropped in questions and he just said, yes, this, that and the other. He covered it. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah, I mean...
And it's great to hear someone like that who say, I've worked something out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is...
And, there's so many things that need to be looked at so much more.
Mm. Yeah, well, and the thing, what I've gleaned from his sort of Q&A sessions on his YouTube vids is that he really can field questions about any aspect of his MBT, and it's quite clear that he's thought fairly deeply on all of the aspects, even the ones that he doesn't cover in his talks. You know what I mean? So
I mean, but that is just brilliant to actually have. You know, to have someone who can come in and actually explain that to you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and for me particularly is that I have, you know what I mean, deep-rooted questions about some of the areas beyond the MBT, beyond the theory of everything, which I hope that he's thought equally as deeply about, and we'll have some sort of we'll be able to have some sort of discourse about. But I'll save that for next week.
Well, I think there's going to be plenty of people on TNS who'll probably want to make some comments.
Yeah, definitely. Get your science and metaphysics hats on for next week, Bob says. Yeah, definitely. I'll have Bob on the show as well, so he'll be co-hosting with me. So hopefully, if I dry up and can't think of anything to say, which is pretty bloody unlikely, I'm sure he'll be able to stump up the goods. What was I going to look? I was going to. Somebody was going on about. Yeah, you see, we do both types of music here. Yeah, we like both types of music, drum and bass. So I'm about to play some, but I've got to find it first, which isn't going to be easy in my 46 gig bloody music file. I can't even think what I was going to look for now. I know it's down the bottom somewhere. That's about as close as I can get. UK dubstep mix. No, not going to go for that. Bloody hell, what was I thinking of? I don't know why I'm asking you. Like, I'm asking you about dubstep.
Me?
I asked the dog about a card trick.
You don't appreciate my taste in music, do you?
Oh no, your taste in music's great. Just don't impose it on me.
What dubstep?
That's all right. But you played Half Man, Half Biscuit. Former Hatman, you should play with Goth on our side if you've got it.
Oh, that one hurts my head. I know it's great, but it reminds me of days tripping in Brentwood.
Well, if it's if it's
having the Brentwood punks playing Crass at 3 a.m. when you're tripping balls is a bit of a head scramble.
I know similar ones.
I can't find a single piece of bloody drum and bass now.
Put something else on.
Oh, right, okay. We'll have a bit of this then. A bit more dubstep for you. This is Rusco and Cockney Thug. And this has been Freeman Jack and...
Nik
Gnomic of the Welfare All-Stars.
Absolutely. We will be back next week. We'll get it together.
Yeah,
Honest.
Shootin the Breeze, yeah. Oh, God, no. I'm going to have to engineer and then do a bloody 6-hour show with Tom Gamble. That's going to be great fun next week. I'm going to have to
work something out, Jack.
Yeah, definitely. I might get the boy to engineer for you next week, and so I've only got to start thinking about things at like 8 o'clock in the evening or something. I'm not going to be able to get through. Anyway. Right, okay, I'm going to put on this tune. Nik, you've been an absolute star, as always. Certainly been busy in the chat box tonight. Thank you all for listening and engaging with the show. And thanks, Nik, for digging me out of having absolutely nothing to talk about on air again this week.
It's been awesome. I don't know how I did that. No.
That's the way it goes. Conversations just flow. We do this off air all the time, but you just you would think that it would be impossible to conduct a conversation in public in such a manner. But once you get into it, it just flows. The stream of consciousness. That's what it's all about.
It's strangely surreal. I'm sat in a shed, and it's totally dark outside. Everyone else has gone to sleep. It's just me and a computer.
Yeah.
Even the dogs have abandoned me now. That's it.
Yeah, I'm sat here with a sullen teenager and a sleeping dog.
All right. Where's your missus got to?
What a strange universe. Oh, no, actually, she's not feeling particularly well. She's upstairs, not feeling that great.
Isn't she?
I should attend to her needs and put on some tunes for these lovely people. Ooh. So I'm going to stick on a bit of Cockney Thug. I've got to say this again. This tune gives me doesn't give me the creeps, it gives me the willies, because it's such a perfect description of one of my near-death experiences. It's alarming. Yeah. Listen to the lyrics and think about this in terms of an actual near-death experience, and it almost perfectly matches one that I had. But anyway, that's...
I'll see how long I can last.
Okay, here's Cockney Thug, Risco, and I'll be back with some tunes after this one until whenever I can be bothered to. See you later, people. See you, Nick.
Bye. Thanks, peeps.
Toward the light. You know what's behind the light? It's not God, it's me. And I'm going to kick your pulsy soul all the way back down the tunnel till you choke on your own fucked up ribs.